This meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. I look to the Deputy Mayor for the motion to adopt the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that the content of the council agenda and addendums for July 22nd, 2019 be adopted as presented.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Any declarations? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. With respect to agenda item 16.1, I'm declaring a conflict as I am I'm on the board of directors of Home Horizon, operating as Farmer Warehouse, and also I am a contracted bookkeeper for the same entity.
So just to be clear, is that a pecuniary interest or under the Code of Conduct?
Under the Code of Conduct.
Okay. And I'll just look at the clerk. Do we need to fill out the paperwork online if it's under the Code of Conduct? She probably did. Councillor Jeffrey, you're ahead of the curve, as always. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It's a point of clarification, maybe. Last week at Development Operations, and here's the positive. The positive is that we had a resident who was watching from home the Development Operations meeting and reached out to me and wanted clarification. It was noted, or the question that they asked was that when the Monaco, which was known as Admiral, back in 2010 first came to the table of that particular council, I declared a conflict of interest at the very first meeting. In fact, it was a public meeting that was held over at the Leisure Time Club. The conflict was resolved, and I then resumed my role at the table for all of the proceedings thereafter. And I simply just wanted to clarify publicly that I do not have a conflict as it relates to the applicant known as Monaco.
Thank you for that. Any others, council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we progress through the agenda, please let me know in the general nature thereof. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor MacLeod.
Moved by Councillor MacLeod and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that Council approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Council held June 24th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you for that. Council, any corrections or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we'll get right into community announcements, and I'll pass it over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Very briefly, on behalf of our own staff in the County of Simcoe, I happened to notice myself and didn't really take note, but now it makes sense. For those who have noticed that their waste collection for today has not been picked up, it's with good reason. There are several delays throughout the municipality. The county has asked that on behalf of the contractor, those who have yet to have their waste picked up, they leave it until 8 p.m. tonight. If it has not been picked up by 8 p.m. tonight, that you're asked to bring it back in and then put it back on the curb for tomorrow morning. So an apology on behalf of the county. There's been some mechanical issues. They're dealing with them, and we'll do their best to resolve and ensure that your waste is picked up this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Maybe you can just review for the public the mobile app or the app on the website that you can check on the current status if you have any questions.
That's right, and thank you for putting me on the spot. I
Yes,
can't remember.
It's www something. No,
No, give me 2 seconds here. Simcoe collects. Simcoe, there, I got it. Just proving that I do have it. And in fact, I actually did receive the Wizard update notification indicating that my waste collection was behind schedule. So if you haven't taken the opportunity to upload, please do.
full marks.
There you go.
Councillor MacLeod.
Well, we have a very big weekend coming up this weekend. It is the 25th Elvis Festival in Collingwood, and I'm told that events that you can watch start on the stage at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, although there will no doubt be activity Thursday evening as people put down their chairs to get the best spots. Tribute artist shows all weekend, and the big wrap up on Sunday night, and don't forget, of course, an antique car parade featuring Elvis tribute artists on Saturday morning starting at 9 o'clock. It's going to be a big weekend.
Very big. Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to just continue to remind our residents to slow down. We had one of our moms have a really scary near miss the other week, and we know our playgrounds are full, our streets are full of kids playing and bike riding, and to our drivers, especially when you're making those left and right hand turns, take an extra moment and really watch for cyclists. Thank you.
Councillor Matty.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Just a very quick thank you to the fire department for acting quickly last Wednesday and saving a boater in distress. It's nice to see our first responders can do it within half an hour. So congratulations, Chief, and thanks for your hard work.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just want to throw out some congratulations to a couple of different groups. First of all, the Free Spirit Community Gardens, which is a very, well for me anyway, a very well-kept secret in our community, a group of volunteers who are cultivating some otherwise completely unused lands and completely organically, and it was wonderful to see what they were growing and what they were doing with it, and to learn some things about organics, and really such a great use for land that otherwise is not being put to any good use. Also, along with yourself and councillors McLeod and Hamlin, I attended the inaugural concert of the Georgian Bay Music Festival and was treated to an absolutely delightful presentation, yeah, mind-blowing presentation, as good as anything I've ever seen in this town, or quite frankly anywhere in Ontario. And so congratulations to that group for having brought forward such a fabulous initiative, and I hope that it'll happen another year. I'm sure it will. And finally, congratulations to Theatre Collingwood for their presentation of Summer of '69, which was very creatively staged in that it was done at the Blue Mountain Inn. Fantastic presentation, fantastic music. Can't say enough about Theatre Collingwood, and I look forward to seeing more productions. And that's it for me. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing
Welcome
this
home.
evening, thank you.
And no postcard.
It's in the mail.
Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just also going to mention the Collingwood Summer Music Festival that Councillor Doherty mentioned. And there's still 2 weeks left of that series, and it's everything from classical jazz, or classical music, I should say, to jazz. And I believe there's still one free concert that's part of that series as well.
Thank you for that. Just a few notes from myself. It's actually been quite an incredible 2 weeks, I think, for Collingwood. I'd like to give a shout out to the Theatre Georgian Bay for their production at the Amphitheatre of A Comedy of Errors. They had me in it, which only compounded the comedy and the errors, but it was a lot of fun, and it's going to continue on a weekend basis. I think the last performance is the Civic Holiday Monday, August 5th. So if you get a chance, it's at 6 p.m. and I think on Sundays they have matinees at 2 p.m. and I strongly recommend it. Some of you may have seen the kickoff of the Cycling Without Age launch at Sunset Village here in Collingwood. Took place last week, and they're looking for volunteers. It's an e-bike and you can take 2 passengers, and I just went around a little city block and I heard some incredible stories. I had Addie Slaughter with me and Eric Milner, and Addie had just had her 101st birthday. So she told me about the history of bikes and it was quite something. So if you are interested, you can go to Simcoe County and you can sign up there, and it's a wonderful opportunity. I highly recommend it. And as mentioned by Councillors Hamlin and Doherty, the inaugural concert for the Collingwood Summer Music Festival. It's been brought back by Daniel Wisnowski, a concert pianist who lives mainly in Vienna and has brought an incredible and eclectic group of artists from classical jazz, chamber ensembles, and world music, and also some events for children. And so it's going to be going on till August 11th, I think. There are 12 ensembles, 20 hours of music, 114 artists, all performing on 3 stages. So if you find the time, it's an incredible event, and I highly recommend it. And the last item on my list today is I attended an event put on by Breaking Down Barriers. We had Tim Harris, a guest speaker, 33-year-old gentleman who's been 19 years in the Special Olympics and came to Collingwood with his message. He has 7 rules. First message is to love everyone, believe in yourself, believe in others, and the others I lost. Work hard was in there too. It was quite an incredible presentation by Tim Harris, and I congratulate the Breaking Down Barriers and their board for making that happen. And that is it for me. We'll move in now to public meetings. I've lost my script already in here. Can you find it for me? Ah, second page. Welcome to the Town of Collingwood's public meeting with respect to the proposed development charges. Members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal once staff have completed their review. Once the public portion of the meeting has been completed, no more public discussion will be allowed. Before closing, I will ask 3 times for further comments. I will then ask council members if they have any final questions for staff. Under the Development Charges Act, any person or organization may appeal the development charge bylaw to the local planning appeal tribunal by filing with the clerk on or before the last day for appealing the bylaw a notice of appeal setting out the objection to the bylaw and the reasons supporting the objection. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses, including postal code, of individuals having an interest in the matter being discussed. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any future council meetings concerning the matter being considered, you must complete one of the interested party forms located at the podium, which is just the table on the far wall there. This public hearing is being recorded along with your name, address, comments, and any other personal information in accordance with the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes will be available to the general public, including the town's website. I will now ask the clerk to confirm that notification to the public has been given as required by the Development Charges Act. Becky.
Through your worship, I can confirm that notice has been provided for this public meeting this evening in accordance with the Development Charges Act.
Thank you. I will now call on the treasurer for your presentation, please, Marjorie.
Through you, your worship, we're going to introduce Craig Benning and Jackie Hall from Hampson, the consultants that have provided us with our background study.
Welcome.
Good evening. So as Marjorie just introduced myself, I am Jackie Hall. I've been retained by the town. I work for Hampson Consulting and I am one of your development charges consultants. Here this evening with me is Craig Benning, who is the partner of our municipal finance practice at our firm, and he'll be available just to help answer some of the questions, particularly since we are still going through some uncertainty with the Bill 108 legislation that has been being brought forward, and I'll chat a little bit about that today as well. As the mayor appropriately pointed out, today is a statutory public meeting, which is required under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act. The main purpose is to allow for the public to make delegations and representation on the information that has been made available. We release information in accordance with the notice requirements of the legislation. The development charge background study was made available on June 3rd, which is more than 60 days in advance of when we're proposing to pass the bylaw, which I'll chat a little bit about at the end of the presentation. We also made sure that the proposed 2019 bylaw was made publicly available and posted on the town's website 2 weeks in advance of the meeting, which was on July 8th. So some people might be familiar with this slide. I've presented it before council a few times now, but just a little bit of an update since we do have a bit more information on Bill 108. The province released the bill in early May 2019. It proposed amending 15 pieces of legislation, but of most relevance to the exercise we're going through right now is the Development Charges Act and the Planning Act. The legislation proposes several amendments to the Development Charges Act, including exemptions for secondary suites in new homes being constructed, so that would be provided at the time of building permit. DC rates are also payable at different times. So for example, now when you come to pull a permit or when the bill receives proclamation, the development charges would be frozen at the time of site plan application. There's a couple of nuances there, but I would mention that municipalities are actually able to charge interest on some of these deferrals and some of these rate freezes. In addition, discounted services, including libraries, parks and recreation, and parking, will be collected through a community benefits bylaw, which will be governed through the Planning Act. I'll touch on a couple of things on this slide here. So draft regulations were released in late June. And currently under the drafts, what we have now been made aware of is that municipalities will have authority to pass a community benefits bylaw beginning January 1st, 2020. The development charges for discounted services will continue to remain in force until January 1st, 2021. So we'll have 1 year to either continue to collect discounted services under the Development Charges Act, or we will bring forward a new community benefits bylaw. You can have one or the other. As of January 1st, 2021, however, if you haven't brought forward a new community benefits bylaw, the discounted services are effectively dead in the water and you're no longer able to recover for those under the Development Charges Act. So in effect, the non-discounted services, which are your engineering and protection services, fire, transit, police, roads, and related water and wastewater services, those will continue under the development charges regime. The other services will then be put under the community benefits bylaw, and I have a bit of a chart or a table that will help kind of show you the distinction between those services. So the main important point to take away though, however, is that you are still able to pass the development charge bylaw for all of the services that we've been chatting about up until this point during this transition period. So as of January 1, 2020, however, you will now have the authority as it's currently proposed to introduce the community benefits bylaw. A couple of things we just wanted to highlight at the public meeting this evening is that since the release of the June 3rd background study, we have continued to have dialogue with staff and reviewed the underlying inputs and assumptions that have gone into the rate calculations. And we've made a few adjustments to some of our assumptions in our calculations, which have actually resulted in a minor decrease to the rates that were shown in that background study. So if I'll show you in a couple of slides, but on the residential side of things, we're looking at about approximately a 3% decrease, and similarly on the non-residential to what we had shown previously in the June 3rd version. So these are the rates that we will be bringing forward for the purposes of the development charge bylaw, subject to, of course, further consultation that will continue over the coming weeks or the coming month in advance of the bylaw being passed. The way that we structure this is perhaps a little bit differently than what we've done in our past presentations, and it's trying to just provide some emphasis in terms of what will continue under the development charge regime and what will become a community benefits bylaw. In the box in the bottom there, you can see that of this total pie, about 32% of those charges relate to discounted services. So those will fall away and go under the community benefits bylaw regime when that gets proclaimed. The non-discounted services, which include your water services, wastewater, roads and related, fire, police, and transit, that represents about 68% of your residential charge. So that will continue under the current regime there. The rates that are shown on the side vary by unit type in the municipality. Singles and semis are going to have the highest rate at about $30,006 per unit. The lowest charge would be $10,445 for apartments that are bachelors or have one bedroom. The varying rates that you see on the side there relate to the occupancy of those units. The Development Charges Act is quite prescriptive and we're required to take it through a series of calculations, and we effectively express it on a per capita, and the per capita rate is then multiplied out by the occupancy of those various unit types there. Just to provide a quick comparison of the current rates that are levied in the town today versus what we've calculated and what we're showing tonight at the meeting. We are calculating an overall increase, this is for single and semi-detached units, and of 22%. The current rate for singles and semis is $24,572, and with our calculated rate of just over $30,000, that's an increase of about $5,400, or the 22% that I just mentioned. The way that we've organized this chart is to once again show that distinction between our discounted and our non-discounted services. So the discounted services represent the bulk of the increase, or 80%, and the non-discounted services, the engineered, we can see that we have some fluctuations there, is much more, it's much less than that at about 6% of that overall increase. And I'll talk about in a couple of slides the policy options for implementing these rates that Council has and that we can continue to work on coming up in the following weeks. This slide here just provides an overall breakdown of the non-residential rate structure. It's quite different than the residential, and there's a few reasons for that. The one being is that for services such as parks, libraries, and the like, those services we attribute 100% to residential development, so you don't see any charges, or you don't see the non-residential charge being comprised of any of those services. So if you look at the bottom, the discounted services and the non-discounted, you can see quite a shift, because the bulk of the service, or the bulk of the rate calculation rather, is related to services such as the roads, water and wastewater that I have been mentioning. So in total, the non-residential calculated rate per square meter is $142.24. Now, the town has a long history of providing, or at least the past two background studies, a history of providing a discounted non-residential rate. So what we've done both in your background study and also before you this evening is providing two rate comparisons. So the chart or the table at the top in blue shows what your current rate is at the municipality today, and that's $68.77 per square meter. We've calculated, of course, just over $140 per square meter. So the difference, it looks quite substantial at about 100% increase overall. However, if we were to go back to your 2014 study, look at the rate that was actually calculated and index it to current day, the rate would actually be closer to $145. So effectively, the rate we're bringing forward to you today would be about a 2% decrease, or really the rate has effectively remained unchanged. So just to show we are still in line with what had been calculated previously for non-residential charges, but however, because of the past discounts that have been implemented from previous councils, that's why we're seeing this dramatic increase. So just some overall comments about why development charges have been increasing in Ontario. Construction costs are increasing at rates faster than indexing or base inflation, so we're seeing some pressure come in there. Increased land values have played a lot into the calculations in terms of both inventories and also in the capital project values themselves. Also, municipalities have done a really great job of undertaking new asset management practices. This has been a requirement of other pieces of legislation, so we're seeing much more robust and much more detailed inventory analyses. We've also, the town in particular has undertaken a number of comprehensive capital planning exercises, especially for services such as parks and recreation. So we're seeing new projects being identified as these plans are being updated. Couple comments about policy. So as part of this update, we did go through the town's existing bylaw and we looked at several things, including non-statutory exemptions. So those are exemptions that the council obviously has power to make decisions on and provide different exemptions about. The bylaw administration and implementation itself, so things in terms of when the bylaw is indexed and how it is administered, and then also definitions, which help provide clarity as to what rates get applied to what type of development. By and large, we're not proposing too many changes from your current policy. So the statutory DC exemptions, those are required under the legislation. The town doesn't have any option in providing those. Those are automatically applied. So boards of education or local boards, this applies to both local and upper tier municipalities. Those are exempt. And intensification of existing residential, so if you're adding a certain number of dwelling units into existing buildings, those are exempt. I kind of touched base on this before, however, but Bill 108 will provide an exemption for the intensification of residential units at time of building permit. So for example, if you were to come in with a permit for a single detached dwelling and you were putting an apartment in your basement, right now you would have to pay a development charge for both the single detached dwelling and the apartment. Under the proposed legislation, the apartment would become exempt and you wouldn't pay development charges on that. In addition, the legislation also provides for a 100% exemption for existing industrial spaces as long as the industrial GFA is 50% of what's existing there today. The town also has several non-statutory exemptions, so these are exemptions that are discretionary. So hospitals are exempt, places of worship, non-residential farm buildings, as well as air-supported structures, and then of course the discount to the non-residential rate. I apologize it's not on the slide here, but that has also been something that's been provided in the past. So as your development charge consultants, our job is to calculate the maximum permissible rates that are allowed under the legislation, and council, you may choose to implement lower rates if you so choose. For example, under the transition provisions of the Development Charges Act with respect to Bill 108, discounted services, so parks, libraries, indoor recreation, the rates can continue until January 1, 2021, or when a new CBC bylaw is brought forward. So you don't necessarily have to implement the new rates that we've calculated before you today. Council can also choose to phase in or discount the calculated rates. So for example, you may choose to continue to provide a discount for non-residential developments like you have in the past. However, the one thing that we do always raise to Council's attention is that, of course, if you're not implementing your fully calculated rates, this does have revenue implications and does put pressure on other revenue sources, such as your property tax or your utility rates. So I won't take up too much time, any more time, because we are here to hear from the public. However, I will just say kind of formally that we are seeking input. To date, we haven't received any written comments on the background study and the related inputs. In order for us to provide a response to those questions or any questions that the public may have, or to take into consideration anything to bring forward to yourself before bylaw passage, we would like to have questions in writing no later than Friday, August 2nd, and they can be directed to Dennis Sloan. And it's my understanding we'll make this presentation available as well with this information in it following the meeting. And that being said, I'll just identify on this last slide here that the passage is proposed for Monday, August 26th.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I will now make the first call for public comments. First call for public comments on the proposed development charges bylaw. Seeing none, I'll go to the second call. Second call for comments from the public. Seeing none, we'll make the final call. This is your chance. All right. And just as a reminder then to the public, this presentation will be posted on the website, and you're invited to make comments through to Dennis Sloan at the town, and it will be forwarded on to our consultants. Council, I think this might be our third time we've seen this, but any questions or comments around the table from council members? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, and through you, I guess, to Jackie. You mentioned that council does have the ability to, or at least the discretion to adjust the calculated DC rates. Can they do that? Can council do that differentially? So, as an example, reduce apartments, townhomes, and maintain the recommended rates for single-family dwellings, as an example?
Yes, through the mayor, to answer your question. So the Development Charges Act is actually quite flexible in terms of what you do for policies. So you can either provide a full exemption, you can provide a partial exemption, and it can be applied differently to different types of units, or also different types of uses. So for example, on I'll just go back here if I may, your current non-statutory exemption, so what you have discretion over. So for example, places of worship are typically an institutional use. We've decided, or as past bylaws, and we're just maintaining it as part of your current practice, to continue to provide an exemption for that type of use. But you could expand it to other things such as daycare facilities, etc. So yes, it's very flexible. However, once again, it does have revenue implications, so it is something to consider.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions around the council table, I will declare the public meeting closed. A reminder to individuals, if you want to be advised of future steps or notified of the progress of this matter, we'd ask you to please complete one of the interested party forms which are on the table just beside the podium. So having done that, we'll move on to deputations, and the first deputation we have is from the Nogasaga Valley Conservation Authority. We have Doug Hevener, and the CAO, and Fred Dobbs, manager, here to discuss the recent changes to core mandate for Conservation Authority. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having me on, Mr. Worship. Through your worship, I'd like to thank Councillor McLeod for getting this together for us today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the changes the conservation authorities are going through in this next fiscal year. And we're also going to highlight a project that we've done that will have some implications on one of the waterways coming into Collingwood. So in the current legislation, during the introduction of Bill 108, the government identified 4 core mandated areas of work. And those 4 core mandated areas of work are the hazard work that we do for flooding, conservation land management that we do, and the source water protection work that we do, and as well as other authority responsibilities, and one they identified was the Lake Simcoe Act. If you look here, our jurisdiction is about 3,700 square kilometers, and you're one of 18 municipalities that we work with. In the current legislation, they've looked at one of the ways that we're now going to try to communicate better, and that will be through memorandums of understanding. Right now, we currently have 13 memorandums of understanding with our municipal partners. Some partners are just been leery to go into a municipal understanding agreement with us, but that's something that the government is really pushing towards. One of the things, if you look at the current work that we do at the MDCA, you look at the stewardship that we do, the forestry work we do, and the outdoor education. Those are not identified as core mandated works. So what the government is proposing, that what we will do is there'll be a process of opt-in, opt-out for the funding of that when it applies levy to those costs. For example, our stewardship programs that you're going to hear about tonight, you may have an option and say, we choose not to support that in any fashion whatsoever. And the total amount that would be needed for that would be then divided in amongst the 17 remaining municipalities, and we basically go out and negotiate that. One of the things that we've really tried to work about in our work here is reducing red tape. That's one of the slogans that our Premier has encouraged us to use. And this is one thing that we find is going to be an encumbrance to that. Doing this negotiation in and out for every item in those 3 is going to be rather difficult. So what we'll probably propose to you as we do it is, these are the associated levy costs. This is the fixed budget. Are you in or are you out? And we'll try to simplify that as best we can. For the next fiscal budget year, it's going to be pretty much status quo. 2020 budgeting will be very similar to the budgeting you've seen in the past. There is a rollout period of 18 to 24 months for this legislation to occur. And those 4 core work areas will be more clearly defined. The regulations have not been written for those core work areas yet, so that will happen. During the reading and passing of Bill 108, one amendment was made to the Conservation Authorities Act, and that was identifying the need for a 5th core mandated area. Legislation passed allowing a 12-month period for conservation authorities to make a business case for this 5th area. And this 5th area would be natural hazard work, environmental stewardship, and watershed restoration, forestry, and the education piece. So there's a good possibility that it may and well become one of our core mandated areas. We have 12 months to do it, and it has to be passed through assent through the Lieutenant Governor as it's laid out right now. So some of the things that have been direct line effects to this work, we're seeing a reduction of 50% of our flood financing. That's for our flood monitoring programs. So for that, the NDCA in 2020, we will see a $91,000, or 2019, we will see a $91,000 decrease in funding, and that will be moving forward. We're looking at potential of source water protection being completely eliminated from the funding program, which would mean an additional $91,000. So we lose about $182,000 total out of that. As well, with the elimination of the Ontario Forest Program for the 50 million tree program, we originally lost $250,000 in funding in that program. And we're one of the top regeneration conservation authorities in the province, rated in the top 5. Last year we planted 120,000 trees. The year before we planted 250,000 trees. And the reason I speak to trees is it's a very key and core part to environmental management and water management. So riparian areas on waterways, which you can hear about from Fred, tree planting is vitally important. The feds have stepped up and offered funding for 3 years of the program, which still looks like instead of a $250,000 loss, it's going to be a $50,000 to $75,000 loss for the program. So we're looking at ways to partner with Simcoe County. So right now, we're looking to partner with Simcoe County to develop a tree planting program for hedgerow program along sort of corridors that have become identified as windswept winter roads. We're looking at trying to create living wind screens, and that's one of the ways we hope to augment this loss in funding. Contract work, we've lost contract workers. We've taken another hit in summer student programming, $15,000 for that, which would provide us with summer students for a couple of months a year. One of the programs that are directly affected is the Phragmites fight here in Collingwood. We have no staff associated with that. On a good note, today we just received $10,000 in funding from the Weston Foundation, which will be applied within the community of Collingwood on our Phragmites fight. Go to your beach and see how that dynamic beach works with Phragmites. You know, I'm talking to the converted here. We're looking as we move forward to communicate better and to have greater dialogue with yourselves. There's going to be changes throughout. We'll probably operate in a different fashion with our planning colleagues in the future, hopefully in a much more close-knit community style. We have had opportunities to meet with REIT in the planning and engineering department in the past, and it's been very good, very great opportunity to work with you. So there are changes coming. Until these regs are written, we really don't know what's going to go, but for the next budget cycle that you will be reviewing as a council, it will be status quo. So now I'd like to pass the mic over to Fred and have him talk about a very important project that we did at the Between Dam site.
Thank you for that, Doug. Just to give you a reminder, you're halfway point. You got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to follow up and mention with the Phragmites control, and I don't know if everyone knows, Phragmites is this ginormous common reed from Europe. It's the tallest plant you see growing up out of the ditch. Very damaging to ecosystems and wetlands as well as infrastructure. But I want to thank our ongoing partners at Blue Mountain Watershed Trust for once again helping to access the Weston Foundation dollars. I want to thank the town and Councillor Doherty for her help as well, for ongoing commitment to help us with disposal and removal of the Phragmites, as well as a shout out and thanks to all the community volunteers who helped us and the Condo Ratepayers Association members as well. So I want to talk about Black Ash Creek, not the largest water course in the area, but one with a very long and significant history with respect to Collingwood, not only in terms of flooding, but also in terms of its environmental features. Black Ash Creek arises in town in the Blue Mountains on top of the escarpment, flows down the escarpment, slopes into the township of Clearview, and then traverses a lot of the western side of Collingwood adjacent to the rapidly urbanizing area. So at its mouth, Black Ash Creek flows into Collingwood Harbour near the old Kaufman plant and looks a lot like this, where you have an estuary and habitat that supports a significant ecosystem as well as sport fishing opportunities for smallmouth bass in the upper left and warm water species like northern pike lower right. In the middle reaches and even within the southern part of Collingwood, Black Ash Creek is emerging as quite a decent trout stream that supports natural reproduction of wild rainbow trout, which Marion was asking me before the Council McLeod, basically how am I going to get more fish to chase? So this presentation has that component. Black Ash Creek is already a decent producer of wild rainbow trout and also contains brown trout and a small toad-like fish called a sculpin, which is like the miner's canary and an excellent indicator of environmental health. That's the small mottled fish on the lower left-hand side. In its upper reaches, Black Ash Creek is a small but stunning, steep, tumbling, high-energy Niagara escarpment stream emerging from groundwater springs and other forest cover in the escarpment slopes. This slide shows a waterfalls where Black Ash Creek flows over the cap rock on the Niagara escarpment. We have a small population of residual native resident brook trout, which have been here for the last 10,000 years, and there's also some production of rainbow trout in this area. Black Ash Creek in 2003 and 2004 was the site of the largest infrastructure project that the Conservation Authority had been involved with, in this case working with our municipal partner town of Collingwood, where 3.7 kilometers of floodway were designed to convey regional storm or approximately Hurricane Hazel to avoid shallow sheet flow flooding throughout the western part of Collingwood. So we're involved. This slide shows what the kind of lunar landscape that emerged after the floodway was created. Since then, NVCA has been extremely committed into helping this small stream within the floodway reach its environmental and recreational capacity as an amenity for Collingwood within public lands that have terrific recreational capacity and now support a highly used trail system. So we've been working with volunteers. I don't have the updated details. Between 2009 and 2016, working with volunteers and with engineering designs and bank stabilization, we spent about $200,000 in the town of Collingwood. A lot of it's federal and provincial funds. We worked with about a little under 900 volunteers and complete about 35 different community events to again help Black Ash Creek achieve its environmental potential for the town. So today you now have emerging vegetation. Looks very different than 2004, 2005. Pretty healthy ecosystem, and an urban trout stream that even kicks out rainbow trout a short distance south of Mountain Road. And there's an interpretive sign along the trail that sort of talks about that urban trout stream potential and the work that's been completed on the lower right. Potential looks good, but urban stormwater is still a threat to this stream, so we really want to work carefully with the town on optimizing stormwater management in the future. So wrapping it up, I want to get to a new emerging opportunity which is associated with the Paytoon Dam. This is a headwater dam in town of the Blue Mountains, located in the headwaters of Black Ash Creek on our Paytoon Conservation Area. On this site, the previous landowner had a recreational pond that was maybe used for swimming or fishing or aesthetics that has degraded over many years, and the dam has failed and broken, but we're still left with a head pond which is very stagnant, has a lot of sediment and nutrients in it, and provides a breeding ground for algae, so terrific. Negative impact to water quality throughout the Black Ash Creek system. Next slide, please. When you're managing a trout stream as well, temperatures which are closely, summer temperatures which are closely related to oxygen concentrations are also very critical. So we did a study look at the temperature system moving in and out of the pond, and you see the blue wiggly line is the cold water conditions entering the pond. The wiggle is because of the increase in temperature in the day and the drop at night, and then the green line shows the increase in temperature associated only 100 meters downstream with the water having flown through the stagnant head pond environment behind this old broken dam. Next slide, please. We've done a very detailed fish community and stream temperature inventory and flow analysis in 17 and 18, supported by Bruce Power. They've been fantastic. The upper plot shows the current temperature system, and the lower shows the projected if we could remove this pond environment and recreate a narrow dynamic cold water trout stream. So just to synthesize, you can see in the headwaters there's a lot of green right now. If we shift that to light blue, that represents a temperature drop, which will optimize habitat for ecological reasons for native resident brook trout. And then around Osler Bluff Road, where it's currently a mustard yellow, indicating cool, warm conditions, we should achieve a drop to green, which will turn the middle reach of brook trout into a juvenile rainbow trout factory, pumping out wild fish out in the harbor to support the sport fishery and local economics. Last or second last slide, we've been working really hard with GSS Engineering out of Owen Sound on designs and working locally on analysis of pre and post flood conditions to look at changes associated with what happens if we remove the dam, working with Greenland. We've been trying to get permits from Ministry of Natural Resources, Niagara Escarpment Commission. Our own in-house planning requirements need to be addressed, and also working with Ministry of the Environment. So what are we really trying to achieve? Basically taking a stagnant head pond environment behind an old broken dam, and it's 8 meters tall, I just can't show you the whole thing because it's covered in trees, and turn it into a stream that looks like the example on the right-hand side, where again you have a high oxygen, cold, dynamic, high quality trout stream environment loaded with trout. Last slide. So if you have any questions, we've we're finalizing our designs and costing, but our best costing estimate right now is $180K to do this project. And thanks to Bruce Power and the town of the Blue Mountains, we've received confirmation of $90K. So we're still looking and submitting applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have three questions. My first one is, you mentioned about working with the municipality to ensure we have the right stormwater controls on our development. What did you mean by that? What can we
To
do?
give you an example, like there are very standard requirements from the province that everyone has to meet, but because we're ecologists with a very detailed knowledge of your local streams and also cold water trout streams in general are one of our specialties, we see a lot of terrific opportunities associated with not only what we do to the stormwater, but where we release it to. For example, do we put it into these cold water trout streams? Do we release it directly to the bay? What are the treatment options that may go beyond the provincial requirements that are customized to the fantastic recreational opportunities and great environment we have in Collingwood? Those are just some of the examples.
I have one follow-up question through you, Mr. Mayor. So we've recently approved a development where the stormwater is going to flow right into the stream from an underwater tank, and then it's going to flow into the stream. Do you, as a matter of course, review those when these applications come through, or how do we make sure your input is included?
I'm often involved. I'm charged with planning and work carefully with our team of engineers and planners as well. So I'm always pleased to provide make sure that we're providing the most progressive and cost-effective input that we can that really matches the unique environment of Collingwood. And I'm not sure, some of them are somewhat grandfathered in terms of the comments, so without knowing the specific development, it's hard to know what the timelines and process may have been.
Okay, thank you. And I actually just have one other question, Mr. Mayor, through you. I think maybe this is Doug. The decrease in funding that's come through to you from the province, are these, does this result in some of your mandates being taken away from you, or are these the things that you'll be coming to the municipalities for funding on?
Thank you, through the mayor, thank you very much for your question. You're really the answer to that question. When we come with a budget under the new mandate, you will be making those decisions. You'll be weighing those decisions. Is the work that Fred's doing that you just saw today valuable enough for your community for you to continue to financially support it, or is it not? And we'll make a business case for that, for you to make a clear and concise decision.
Okay, because the reason I ask this is it seems like it's another, I thought when this first came out with the changes to the Conservation Authority, you were having mandates taken away. But really, is it right to be summarizing this is another downloading by the province to the municipalities to fund?
I think I'll quote the CEO of Simcoe County that this is indeed a stealth downloading of costs to municipalities, I think.
Okay. And then, sorry,
We had 3, we're at 5 here.
Oh,
Let's make this the last one, Councillor.
Okay, fast one, count. Are we one of the municipalities that now has a memorandum of understanding with the Conservation Authority, and will that be changing? Thank you.
Currently we do, yes.
Council, any other questions? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just you alluded to the Phragmites eradication projects around the harbour town of Collingwood. Will there be a project undertaken this year, or has that been cut as well?
Through the mayor, I just want to mention that with the recent confirmation, we're really excited. We're still trying to confirm what level and scope of project we may be able to deliver for the remainder of the summer. So we absolutely are targeting some 2019 works.
Good to hear. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Dobbs. Thank you so much for coming to see us. I want to talk a little bit about I would like you to talk a little bit about the impact of this dam removal when it comes to sport fishing. You say that there's brown trout that live in this creek, and there are rainbow trout that could be living further up the creek. What impact does sport fishing have in this neck of the woods from a financial point of view? I know we care about the environment. We're going to talk later during this meeting about plastics, and all of us are well aware of climate change. But tell me from a financial point of view what those rainbow trout and what those brown trout mean to our economy around here.
Through the mayor to Councillor McLeod, I don't have a hard economic survey, but I always wonder myself. I like getting out in the boat in August, launching in your beautiful launch facility, and I'm amazed at the number and density of like large downrigger salmon boats that are piled in there in the summer. So to me, the impact looks huge, but I don't have a number to give you. And then likewise, historically, the migratory rainbow trout fishery has been, you only look at even the old photos from Thornbury where you have anglers lined up like boot to boot and then supported local gas stations, restaurants, even like community fishermen's breakfasts like Dunedin. So I think it's there. But I think that certainly the model of working towards habitat restoration where you get low cost, consistent production of high quality fish without having to rely on artificial means and ongoing cost and investment is extremely good value for the economic return.
Thank you so much, Fred, and I will discuss with you later what flies I should be using to catch those brown trout. Thank you, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Saunderson. Thank you for the presentation. My question is a clarification to the last slide as it relates to the $2 figures. You've got $180,000 for the project, 90,000 of which is coming from potentially the town of Blue Mountains and Bruce Power. Is this presentation being made to the other stakeholders? There are 18 shareholders that make up the MVCA. We're one of them. So are you talking to Clearview, Wasaga, et cetera? And Bruce Power, that's an interesting fit. I mean, they've got lots of money, and it's, glad that they're making that donation. I wasn't aware. I know that we as APCOR provide power to Thornbury. Is Bruce Power on the doorstep or a part of the town of Blue Mountains? What's the connection there?
Through the mayor, to answer your questions in order, our basically communications to date have only been with the town of the Blue Mountains, which would be the host municipality for the project. I think Clearview has a very strong stake, and then of course Black Ash Creek outlets into Collingwood Harbour. So we saw those three as being the main municipalities that would actually benefit very specifically from this project. Of course we keep the other 15 in the loop as through our board members that were working on this initiative. Bruce Power initially approached us because they need compensation credits with Federal Fisheries and Ocean for the fish that get picked up in their coolant water intake. So we developed a plan for them to address that. They shifted gears and didn't need our help, but very kindly decided to fund our environmental initiative in spite of the fact that it was no longer required for their federal credits. So they've been extremely good stewards of the Lake Huron-Georgian Bay watershed.
Thank you. Perhaps through you, Mayor Saunderson, to yourself, and is there an official request coming, or is this purely just for information tonight?
Well, I'll let the presenters. My understanding is tonight's for information purposes, and then maybe followed by other discussions.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. And if I may, this is one of the things we want to talk about. This is a project that we've done. And usually when we get money and we move it into our stewardship program, we deliver $6 on every dollar we receive. So I want to show you the value that stewardship has for our watershed from that perspective. If there was no funding for it, which you may choose not to provide any funding for, you're potentially flushing away that $7 you can raise for every dollar that goes into the program. And we've proven that historically, year after year, over decades, that we can do that. And we don't do that always on the backs of our municipal partners. We do that through partnerships with organizations, nonprofits, funding agencies, and foundations that can support our work. And it's important, I think, for you to understand and realize that. And I hope that you do see the benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I was looking for simply for clarification. So I do appreciate that. If I may, one last comment, and that is, I'm glad that you touched on the opportunities potentially for the tree canopy or the tree programs, because that has been a strength of the county for years, and it'd be great to see increased synergies between the Conservation Authority and the county going forward. So, thank you.
Councilman, any questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very informative.
Thank you.
Our next deputation is the Sunset Point Residents Association. And we have John McGarry and Edward Rowe here. Welcome, Mr. McGarry.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to appear today. And a special thank you to the Clerk's Department for helping us to organize what we need to do. And I'd like to acknowledge the support from my colleague, not Andrew Rowe, Edward Rowe.
Did I say Andrew? I thought I said Edward. My apologies, Ted.
And also from other neighbors in the Sunset Point Residents Association. Right? So, addressing the association was originally formed about 10 years ago to protest a plan at that time for extensive paving of Sunset Point Park to provide additional parking lots. And we were successful at that time in beating that back and understanding that with not providing paving additional parking lots, that would create overflow parking on the surrounding streets, which the residents were prepared to accept because it happens, 8 or 10 weekends in a year, and it just is, worth it to absorb that so as not to pave over additional parking. Okay. And so you understand that it's not, a bunch of quote-unquote rich fat cats in Sunset Point. A lot of our neighbors and members of our residents association are contributing members to the community in many ways through Rotary, Provost clubs, hospice boards, the hospital board, Phragmites removal. We have been instrumental in working on that around our neighborhood. So, and we do pay, close attention to the park. We're day-to-day users of it year-round. We participated in the original provision of bench and table combinations around the west end of the park and maintained those over a period of years until the advent of more, newer benches are being installed daily by or frequently by the Parks and Rec Department. We were instrumental in installing the flagpole that sits there today, and we continue to provide fresh flags to that on that flagpole through cash contributions of some of our members to keep that going. Okay? We did win the original, paving battle, to prevent the parking. We did lose one more recently, where the second trail was installed, a paved trail that was installed across the close to St. Lawrence, and it's sad to say that, as predicted, that trail is basically not used. So unfortunate. If I can, do I have the ability to move this? There we are. So about 3 years ago, I guess now, so hundreds or possibly even thousands of people were involved in and contributed to the Waterfront Master Plan consultation process with Brooks McElroy. And I know from recent conversations and ongoing conversations with Director Culver that there's lots and lots of work going on, more or less behind the scenes, on the Waterfront Master Plan process. But I would have to say that there is sort of limited public information out there on what progress is being made. So we're asking if we could see project plans with timelines and with regular timely updates, be it on the Engage Collingwood webpage and or in the periodic municipal newsletter that comes out, to give us specific milestone achievements on, on progress in the waterfront master plan with dates. Right? And I get it that there are several projects underway at any given time in that, and I do sometimes wonder, and I would ask through your worship to perhaps to our CAO, if we have adequate staffing really in that department to carry on these major projects. So, and major concurrent projects for big dollars. Specifically on the Enviro Park within Sunset Point, and again, I'm now aware through recent conversation with Director Culver that there is lots of planning work underway, but we would like to see some posted timelines for actual achievements on that plan, and with some dates posted as to when we're going to start and when we might complete. Okay? Further, there was a survey around the public survey on the Enviro Park that took place, I think maybe 3 months ago or so now, and we would certainly like to see some published results on that. Wondering, what the public's demands were through that survey. Okay. There are some posted project components on the Engage Collingwood website page, but no dates, and we would like to see that. So, and again, we'd like to see some public reporting on the survey. Oops.
Just as a quick reminder, John, you're at halfway, 5 minutes.
In the Enviro Park, in the earlier public consultation, there was a lot of interest to get washrooms installed in the pavilion there. That pavilion is used by, I would guess, thousands of children every summer, and there is no washroom in there. There's like a sink with a water tap. So we're asking, is there provision for washrooms in the Enviro Park updates? And again, have we got some timelines on that? There was a lot of discussion about the possibility of a splash pad, and I'm quite sure that was asked for in the survey that went out. I'm just wondering what the status is, if that is in the plan or likely to be. Bylaw enforcement, there have been, I would like to say we've seen significant improvement in the last few weeks with the changes that were made with the signage and changes to the parking regime along the entire St. Lawrence and in front of the water filtration plant. That is certainly helping. There have been several instances recently of RV overnight camping, and sometimes accompanied by late night noise issues. Most recently, for says Jean-Baptiste Day, we had an impromptu fireworks display down there at like 1 o'clock in the morning. With the fine, we understand, we're seeing fines and warnings being handed out. The fine, I thought was $20. I was told the other day it might be $30, but we still think that is a little bit of an inadequate disincentive, because we have a lot of people down there coming to Sunset Point Park because it's free, versus, for example, Wasaga Beach Provincial Park, where it's like $20, $21 to bring a car in. We would also ask who has the responsibility for enforcement of parking. Parking, we're clear, it's bylaw enforcement, but it's not clear who has responsibility for after hours issues. So if something's going on late in the evening or through the night, some of our residents have difficulty getting anybody to pay attention, whether it's OPP or our own by law enforcement people, so we'd like some clarification on that. I might say we would also like to see a little bit more enforcement of speeding issues along St. Lawrence, particularly as they make the turn onto Niagara. Our friend George and Mr. Powell has had people on his lawn with their cars more than one occasion. So, and might I say in passing, I think our transit bus is one of the worst offenders. So, hasn't been on the lawn, but it goes along St. Lawrence pretty quick. So, residents have registered some unhappiness with the parking barriers. We understand they're temporary. We understand they're going to be removed. We did get a date recently from Director Culver that they're coming up by the beginning of September, so that is good. Looking forward to that. Memorial benches and trees. There are currently 45 of these memorial benches in Sunset Point Park, with an additional 4 currently under construction. So they chew up quite a bit of space, valuable and scarce green space in the park. And it's really becoming, truthfully, a bit silly, the number of them down there. And they are not all utilized by any means. There's rarely more than a small fraction of those in use at any given moment. And so we wonder, is there a policy or is there a limit to the number and placement of these memorials? So, in conclusion, I'd like to thank you, Your Worship, and thank the Council. And special thanks to Director Culver, who has been extremely responsive to SPRAC's questions and issues. And in summary, I would like to say that generally, all our Sunset Point Residents Association members, and I suspect that the community at large, would like to see more specific information on projects with timelines, dates, what are we starting and when are we finishing. Other than that, I would entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Ted. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Colmy.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thanks John and Ted, that was a really good presentation. So similar to what Deputy Mayor had said, I just want to make sure I'm writing down all the asks. So one of them I made note of, the ask is to see the survey results of that Enviro Park survey that came out, which I want to think was March. And I know it was really popular. We had, I think, around 700 respondents. So I guess I'm looking at how I make sure that happens. The notice of motion seems pretty heavy for the survey results. So.
Well, my understanding, and really this is an information session, so I think you can ask Councillor or Director Culver. My understanding is the results will be coming out with a staff report when we're moving this project forward. So the results will become public. At this point in time, we're still gathering information. So we're not releasing, or my understanding is we're not planning to release the results in a vacuum until we have a staff report talking about various options.
Okay, so results with staff report. And then the other comment I'd like to offer to John, I think it was an important one, because you can count on me to talk about washrooms and crosswalks, but that in our PRC master plan, that came together specifically at Enviro Park, it does say that we need some traffic slowing measures and pedestrian crossings, especially at that area, and that the consultant's recommendation was certainly to add washroom facilities. So I'm sure your sentiments are not alone in that. They're reiterated here in the PRC master plan as well. So thanks again.
Once again, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, Council? Oh, Deputy Mayor? You're still on.
I just wanted to ask Mr. McGarry, and I say this with tongue in cheek, Mr. McGarry, did I hear you correctly when you said that potentially we were understaffed? And therefore, are you okay if we increase taxes to complement our staffing for the PRC?
This is public.
Your Worship, I understand it's public, and yes.
Okay.
We do feel that park and the waterfront master plan are the crown jewels of Collingwood. and are worth every penny of the investment. And if it requires some additional investment and within the millions that are likely to be spent over the next 10 years to add a project management person to do it, I'm okay with that.
So if I may, a follow-up, and it's more of a comment than a question. And it sort of piggybacks on Councillor Comey and the desire for information as it results to, public comments for the park and the Enviro Park. My guys are 16 and 14, and they were, 6 and 4 at one time when they were using that park, and when they were in 6 and 4, I was starting to see its better years behind it. And so I know people would love to see that revitalized. But that said, I remember quite clearly the evening the presentation was made by David Wood from Envision Tatham as it relates to the northern part of the park and the paving of that single-use lane. And to this day, I've talked to David on occasion about how badly I felt that we as a council put him in a very uncomfortable and awkward position from a professional standpoint. And to this day, I can't go down there and not think that what a mistake that was, that we spent that amount of money to pave a single lane use. So the reason I bring that up is not to sort of relive the past, but I'm hoping that we've sort of seen the error of our ways as it relates to that park, and that we take the necessary time, that if this is a process that takes a little bit longer than we all would like, that we allow for that to happen, simply to ensure that whatever transpires down there is in the best public interest of not only the residents who neighbor there, but the residents from the municipality as a whole, but those who visit as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you to your association. I think you've already got some responses from Mr. Culver, but certainly our doors are always open. This is a municipality where municipal dialogue is an essential. So thank you very much. We've heard your comments. Consent agenda. Who would have that?
That would be me, Your Worship.
Councillor Comey.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration by council, be received. And those would be items 8.1 through 8.11.
So first I'll call the vote on the motion to accept the agenda, and then I'll ask for items to be pulled. So all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Any items to be pulled? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 8.5, please.
8.5. Any others, council? I will be adding to that the 8.4 and 8.7. So go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
Oh, thank you. This item caught my attention. It's a resolution that was passed by the town of Brantford, and it's asking that the province consider improving its legislation around cannabis with respect to its impact on where they're located in municipalities. We know that the province has now gone out for a second round of lottery licenses to be issued, and it has struck me, if someone in Collingwood won the lottery, we could have a cannabis store here as early as October. So what I liked about their resolution, and I'm going to be asking council to consider whether they would support this resolution, is that they're asking that the province be given unrestricted ability to control the location of retail cannabis stores through zoning, or in the alternative, to limit the concentration and number of them by introducing minimum separation distances, a minimum of 500 meters. Secondly, that the stores be restricted to a commercial zone. And thirdly, that we get more defining of sensitive land uses in addition to schools. And they suggest, for example, daycares, colleges, community centers, nursing homes. And that the current minimum separation distance of 150 meters from a cannabis retail store to a school be increased to a minimum of 500 meters, and lastly, that they get more of the excise tax that's collected by the province. I know that when we passed our welcoming resolution for cannabis stores, we were well aware that we had no authority to restrict where they went. We did, I believe, pass a resolution that said we would prefer if they went here, there, and otherwise respected what we thought were sensitive uses. But I did think that Brantford's resolution to the Premier of Ontario asking for a little more ability for us to make sure that they're located in places where we would want to see them in our town was worthy of support. So I'm not sure what to do in terms of asking for.
So I put to the clerk and our understanding of procedural bylaw.
So under section 210 of the procedural bylaw, any motion that's pulled by a council member does not require notice.
So I guess I would move that we adopt a similar resolution, and I'd be looking for a second.
Yes, I think, so when you say a similar resolution, maybe you can just be more explicit in what the intent is and who we're sending it to.
It would be sent to the, just as Brantford's is, to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario. And it would repeat the endorsement that's set out there, which was something from AMO and from the City of Brantford. And the purpose of it is to ask the province to give municipalities more authority to guide where cannabis retail outlets will be located in their municipalities, in our municipality.
Yes, so it's an endorsement of a resolution from the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, and what the clerk has recommended is that you put a motion to endorse this motion. Is that what you're saying, this resolution?
To support this
To
resolution.
support the resolution?
Okay, I so move.
I look for a seconder. Deputy Mayor, any questions or comments before I call a vote? Councillor Jeffrey, and then you, Deputy
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I think before I've made this comment before concerning the consent agenda and things arising from it. I really think that we need staff input, but before, and I think at maybe first flash a reading on our own, we may decide individually whether we think it's good or bad, but I still think it's important to have staff feedback on that. So I'd be very willing to support something that would request staff to take a look at it before we send that out. I know we had big discussions on it, as Councillor Hamlin had referred to, but I would prefer to have staff just give it a quick over to make sure we're endorsing something that we can support within our policy structure.
I would be content with that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and I think that's actually consistent with some of the changes we're looking at doing with the procedural bylaw. I know Clerk Thomas and Deputy Clerk Dahl have been looking at ways to flesh out requests for staff reports and this type of thing to give council and the public warning and understanding what it is we're debating, because this is a fairly lengthy resolution. So then I guess we could take this maybe perhaps as a friendly amendment. And Councillor Hammond, you're content with that? You can second it, Councillor Jeffrey. And I know you had a comment, Deputy Mayor.
My comment actually related more to the timeline, and so I'm fine with this, and maybe I could ask and just pass it through to staff. My understanding was the announcement of the next round was going to be August the 20th, and that for proponents who are looking to actually secure leased space, they actually had to have written confirmation of a letter of intent with an application in by August 7th. So I'll just state that for record, and maybe staff could confirm that as part of their report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Deputy Mayor and also perhaps to Councillor Hamlin. I don't think I would have any concerns with us supporting a generic resolution to give municipalities more autonomy. But I think to reflect Councillor Jeffrey's concern, I'd have some concerns without having done the analysis on the specific separation, distance, and definition included in this bylaw. So to say that we support more local autonomy, I think we can say that, but to to support the specifics in the Bradford bylaw, I think we'll probably need to be a bit more judicious and do some more analysis. And to the Deputy Mayor's point, through your worship, the legislature isn't sitting and will not return until sometime in October. So for the minister to be able to provide this authority to municipalities in time for the next round, I think would be a challenge, to say the least.
So with that being said, then I will call the vote, and we are voting on getting a staff report on the specifics of this resolution. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Hanley. So I had pulled two items, the first being 8.4, and 8.4 is the Great Lakes National Program. It's a draft Canada-Ontario agreement with respect to the Great Lakes water quality and ecosystem health. It's been put out for public comment. I pulled it in large part because tonight we have the resolution, my motion for the plastics issue, but this goes far beyond that and really does overlap to a great degree with the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. I also wanted to raise for the public that on when, I think it's Wednesday, I'm not sure, August 6th, that's probably Tuesday, there will be a meeting of the IJC, the International Joint Commission on the Great Lakes, that's taking place at the Legion. It goes from 3:45, I think, to 6:15, and they will be discussing, among other things, the situation with water levels and the water ecosystem and the health of the Great Lakes, and it's a public forum, so they're inviting the public to come and state your concerns for the IJC as well. So I just wanted to raise that for the public and council. The second item is 8.7. It's the Ministry of the Solicitor General, just noting that Collingwood is in compliance with the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act. That's not a just, that's actually a big thing. So I wanted to thank Chief Barr for getting that in order, and it's an important annual step, and we have checked that box for this year. So thank you, Chief. And that's it for the consent agenda then. And the next, we have reports and minutes of other committees and boards, including the Public Library and the Police Services Board. Who would have that?
I would have that, Mayor Saunderson.
Councillor Berman.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that council hear and receive the following board minutes. Collingwood Public Library Board Minutes, June 27th, 2019, and Police Service Board Minutes, June 24th, 2019.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? I'll start with Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And through you, either to Councillor Berman or perhaps Director Haig, there is some discussion noted in the minutes in regard to the ongoing issues with the doors, the automatic doors at the library, and some analysis from Manager McNulty as to what the options are and the cost. And it begs the question to me as to why the builder is not being held responsible for the doors that have been a problem, as I understand it, pretty well from the beginning.
I think we, in order, before, is there an update, Ken? Don't tell me that you're wearing a wrist support because you got caught in the doors.
Through you, Worship, I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer this question. I'm not sure if Councillor Berman as well. Probably Dave McNulty would be the best person to answer this question. He did report to the library board about it. He did say that I'm going to misquote him if I do that. I think you're better to address it to him. I know there was a problem when the building was completed with some deficiencies that were noted, and so not all the payment was made. And the suggestion was asking these guys to come back would be counterproductive. We're better off just to start again. But I really do believe that you'd be better to ask that question to Mr. McNulty. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
Okay. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Perhaps through you to Director McDonald, I could get an answer to that question, maybe not right at this moment, but
Yeah, I think just follow up with Dr. Dave McNulty and a copy, Director McDonald. Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just wanted to highlight out of the Police Services Board meeting that I was able to bring information from a workshop that I attended in Quebec City regarding responding to the drug crisis. And one of the presenters there was the Peterborough Deputy Police Chief, and he really honed in on, and I really heard the importance of municipalities being able to assist in the prevention and awareness and education regarding the opioid crisis. And so I'm very pleased to highlight that the Police Services Board has supported the creation of a task force which will consist of members of the municipality, the Collingwood OPP and local partners in order to work on those very important priorities for our community. It really was an eye-opener as to, we might be small, but the problem is certainly ours to help with.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think we are 4th or 5th in Simcoe County for opioid ER visits. And what Councillor Jeffrey didn't tell you is that she is the new chair of the Police Services Board, so don't make her angry. Councillor Coney, did you have your hand up?
I did. So there were two quick congratulations, and one of them was to Councillor Jeffrey. You just touched on it. It was very pleased to see about the creation of that task force. I see it moved by you and seconded by Pastor Donna. So I hope Council continues to receive some updates on how that task force is progressing. And then I wanted to congratulate CEO Haig on that. Back to the library minutes on the teen services relocation. I'm sure that was a lot of hard work, and it's noted here that it's been very positive feedback, and I'm sure that it is. So congratulations on that move. And that's all.
So now we'll call the vote. All in favor of receiving the Library and Police Services Board minutes? And it's carried unanimously. Next up, Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, and I will pass it over to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that Council receive the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee reports from its meetings held June 25th, July 4th, and 5th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Deputy Mayor?
The next one, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that Council approve the Auditor's Report 2018 financial statements.
All right, Marjorie, I know we had a presentation at the SIC meeting. Is there anything you want to add to it?
Through you, Worship, I believe that Sue Bragg did cover all of the salient points in regard to financial statements, so I don't think I could add anything to that.
Okay. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Deputy Mayor, 11.1.2.
Again, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that Council receive staff report PW 2019-15 and authorizing additional budget of $650,000 for a total construction budget of $1,369,803 for the wastewater treatment plant diesel generator replacement project.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Standing Committee report.
Again, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that the Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held July 16th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Development Operations Services Standing Committee. Councillor Jeffrey, you're the chair, but you were away, so Councillor Doherty as vice chair, are you carrying the items today?
I am, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull. Be it resolved that staff report P 2019-33 be received and council authorize the discharge of a site plan control agreement from the remnant lands of the Wildwood Cove project located at 11616 Highway 26.
Is there anything you'd like to say about
Yes, by dismissing this site plan control agreement, the developer is allowed or has been enabled to donate the land to a land trust organization who will be oh, my brain has just stopped working. Who will be taking care of the lands on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry about that.
That's okay, you handed it away probably too soon. So it's the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy. It's a charitable not-for-profit organization that will steward and maintain the land in the Escarpment natural state. So unless there's any questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull. Be it resolved that staff report P 2019-34 be received and council enact and pass authorization bylaws to execute a site plan control agreement, encroachment agreement, and hoarding agreement conditional upon receiving the following within 2 weeks of the date of this approval or by August 5th, 2019. Demonstration that the necessary easements are in place to ensure legal access over the adjacent lands, including 1 Hume Street and any other lands as may be required to allow the proposed access to 263 Huron-Ontario Street from Hume Street to function appropriately, and easements as may be required for any other purposes. Secondly, insurance being provided in the prescribed format to the satisfaction of the town treasurer, and a certified check being provided in the amount of $10,000 to cover the estimated cost of outstanding contingency fees expended in the review of this development application for additional legal review and for inspection of the design and landscaping components of this project. And the council herein approve discharging the site remediation agreement from the title of the lands to be developed pursuant to the site plan control agreement between Stonebrook Developments Collingwood Inc. and the town of Collingwood only. And the site remediation agreement shall remain on title to all other lands listed in the site remediation agreement, and any securities as may be determined are available shall be retained until works set out in the agreement are complete. And that council herein approve discharging the Section 37 agreement from the title of the Monaco property. Thank you.
Director Farr, I'll look to you. Just, I understand there's been some recent developments on this matter, so I'll ask you just to.
Post the revised recommendations document. Could you scroll down to the revised recommendation? Well, we'll start here. You could expand that. We'll scroll through it. Through Mr. Mayor. At the Development and Operations Committee meeting, committee recommended a number of changes to the original recommendations. Thank you. At the Planning Development Operations Committee meeting, the committee recommended approval of a number of amended recommendations from the original recommendations made, and they included the the provision to address the requirement for necessary easements. Could you scroll down, Adam, please? Continue to scroll down. It was proposed that council authorize staff to enter into a development agreement that address the future maintenance standards and condition of the vacant property at 1 Hume Street to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services. And those two changes were recommended subsequent to the Development Operations Committee meeting. Staff, could you scroll down please, Adam? Staff revised those recommendations, and it's been brought to my attention in this first 2-week extension here that the date needs to be August 6th, so I'll be referring to it as that. August 5th is the Monday of the long weekend. So these revised conditions indicate that conditional upon that the site plan approval agreement, the encroachment agreement, hoarding agreement, are conditional upon receiving within 2 weeks the specified information that includes the easement. Could you scroll down, Adam, please? Insurance. I'll make a note here for council. Typically, staff require that insurance and securities be provided by the applicant in advance of matters proceeding to council. In this case, there's an outstanding matter in that the insurance provided by the applicant was not on the prescribed format to the satisfaction of the town treasurer. We've been advised that that information is forthcoming, but is not yet in hand. So this condition would require that that information be provided before August 6th. We would expect it sooner. I've also been advised by staff that there was some outstanding costs incurred in the review of this development application through the processing of the site plan. And there's some additional legal costs, and staff retain monies for inspection of the project at completion. So in order to address those costs, staff are requesting a certified check be provided. Could you scroll on to Adam, please? What has been removed here is the condition that I mentioned about, not the condition, but the recommendation that I mentioned authorizing staff to enter into a development agreement with regard to the status of the vacant lands to the east of this property. Committee members have expressed some concerns about the condition of that property. It is not the subject of the site plan agreement right now. It is vacant lands. Staff consulted with the town solicitor. Town solicitor referred staff to the site remediation agreement that currently is in place for all of the lands, including the lands of the Monaco and the adjacent lands. The original recommendation to the committee was that the site remediation agreement be discharged from the lands in their entirety. The solicitor's advice was that the site remediation agreement be discharged simply from the Monaco lands that are the subject of a site plan agreement that includes a bundle of securities ensuring performance. That site remediation agreement specifies that the lands, the vacant lands, would be required to be graded, spread with topsoil, seeded or sodded to the town's satisfaction. Additionally, as it relates to the condition of the vacant lands into the future, the town has a property standards bylaw. Property standards bylaw includes specific provisions for commercial lands, of which this is a designated mixed-use property with commercial on the ground floor. Carries a commercial designation, allowing residential above the ground floor. But these provisions in the property standards bylaw require fencing of the lands to ensure that there are not impacts to adjacent properties. Those two provisions, the town solicitor suggested would provide appropriate safeguards. One of the issues in terms of entering into a development agreement the staff were cognizant of is that a parcel at 1 Hume, the vacant property, is subject to a separate land ownership, and to make performance to an aesthetic standard on that property is subject of a development agreement before the site plan control agreement for the Monaco lands could be completed. Would, in my view, present some technical, logistical challenges that might be difficult to overcome. The last provision here in the agreement, it essentially retains the section 37, discharge of section 37 agreement, which is now obsolete on the site as the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment adopted in 2012 removed the requirement for a section 37 agreement, and this clause essentially has been set out on its own, excluding the recommendation that the site remediation agreement be discharged in its entirety. So those are the changes that were made, and I apologize for the lengthy description. And I would just remind council that I'm asking for the performance date to be switched to August 6th from August 5th as a result of my error.
Thank you, Adam. Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Jeffrey.
I guess my comment would be I really want to vote against all of this. But I guess the reality is that a previous council gave away the farm. And the most offensive is the bonusing agreement given the mass and scale of the building that's going to go up. So I guess at the very least, I maybe just ask that one clause with the approved discharging the section 37 be voted on separately, please.
Yeah, we'll sever that out. I guess the point is, and I'll look to Director Farr, is that once OPA 26, I think it was, in 2012 was passed, it removed the ability to charge a bonusing.
I still want my rant.
All right, you shall have it. Councilor LaPau.
Just further to the comments made by Councillor Jeffrey, can we be reminded of how many dollars were taken off that farm? Perhaps this is directed to Director Farr? How many, what are we leaving on the table with section 37?
There's quite a bit of complexity that's filed through the chair, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, I think it's in the neighborhood of $600,000.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Jeffrey. Just take a breath. I have another question as well for Director Farr, if that's okay with you, Your Worship. Director Farr, what happens if this particular property has been the long and storied history of disappointment for people who live nearby? It is nothing, this fits and starts has happened on this development. What happens on August 7th if none of this has come to pass? If the requirements of this bylaw or this motion don't come to pass?
Director Farr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor McLeod. The performance period structure as such, it would mean that the site plan was not approved and that the matter would have to come back to the next Development Operations Committee meeting to be revisited. I tried to put sufficient time, although it will be again another time crunch, to bring the item forward again to Development Operations Committee and then again to Council on August 26th.
Thank you. And just a couple more, Your Worship, if that's okay. We talk about the site remediation agreement, and you explained, Director Farr, that there was supposed to be sodding and sorts of things that happened. Did those things happen?
No, through Councillor McLeod. No, those things didn't happen. There's some file correspondence talking about the extension of the terms of the agreement. Generally, the expectation here is that these lands they are developing at the Monaco site, and on the basis of this site plan approval and the expected building permit, and that the other lands would then be the subject of a future site plan agreement.
And as a follow-up to that, when this site changed hands in the not-too-distant past, was it made clear to the new owners that there was a site remediation agreement in place?
Are you going to answer that, Director Farr?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the record is there. The applicant's well aware that the site remediation agreement is in place on the lands.
And so as a follow-up to that, through you, Your Worship, why is it that we're recommending giving back the securities for the site remediation agreement that was not met?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor McLeod, that is one feature of the recommendations that was changed between the Development Operations Committee and today. It's not being recommended that the securities be discharged.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that is the list of my questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Just for my clarification, Director Farr, just to follow up on that last question, my understanding is that the cleanup remediation requirement is, for the Monaco site is being lifted. It's not being lifted for the other vacant lot, which is owned by another corporate entity. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that the securities are being retained in relation to the other vacant lot?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's the change from the development operations.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments, Council? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to the Development Operations Committee and before this meeting, I've had lots of chances to talk to Director Farr, and I've had everything resolved through the matters he's brought forward before us as conditions, except for one, and that is what the boundary is going to look like between 1 Hume Street, which is the site subject of the site plan agreement before us, and the site which will remain undeveloped to some unknown future date. So I just wanted to ask Director Farr if he could just confirm what will be shown or what is shown on the site plan for that boundary treatment.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hamlin, the site plan indicates that there's going to be a curb that delineates the property boundary, except where the access includes a portion of the adjacent lands. The curb will extend along the natural boundary of that access point out to Hume Street.
And so what do you foresee, and maybe, well, anyway, what do you foresee as what will happen on that boundary during the time after the One Monaco site is built and until the other site is built?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hamlin, through discussion with engineering and reviewing the plans, it's expected that there would be some grading on a slope down to the vacant property. However, I've referred this question to the applicant. The applicant has indicated that the owner and the applicant's in attendance tonight of council, wishes someone to speak, has indicated that they'd be amenable to fencing the property line.
Could we hear from the applicant on that fencing question, Mr. Mayor?
Is there someone from the applicant that can come forward and answer that question?
So through your worship, I'm Laura Danard, I'm the planner representing our client. So we were discussing with Director Farr earlier, so it is going to be a curb coming across where the ramp is, and then we were going to be grading and seeding exactly as we had agreed to in the remediation agreement, which was not previously followed by the previous owner, and it was going to have a fence, undecided at this time what type of fence, but there will be a fence there surrounding the area, again, to keep it safe, so as it is private lands.
May I ask
Go ahead.
will this be a wooden fence? And where I'm coming from is this site has been an eyesore in our community for 2 decades. And in the event that the more easterly parcel isn't developed for considerable time, it'd be nice if that corner was, left in a nice state until the balance of the site was developed. So in my mind, that means perhaps a wood fence to give it some complete look. Do you see that as a possibility?
It is a possibility, but I'll definitely confirm with our clients and everything to make sure that the fence is, it's not a construction fast fence or something like that left. It will be a nice respectful fence and everything surrounding that area, and then it will be, again, graded, seeded, and left in a good working order after construction is completed, for sure.
So I'll leave that in Director Farr's hands. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, seeing no other questions or comments, then I will call the vote. All in favor? Councillor Doherty. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Jeffrey, you asked for the last one to be separated. So I'm calling the vote then. You would do take out the shortest paragraph of the longest motion of the day. Thank you. So what Councillor Jeffrey has asked is that we sever the paragraph that reads, and that council herein approve discharging the section 37 agreement, round bracket bonusing agreement, end bracket from the title of the Monaco property. So on this vote, we are going to vote for the motion, save and accept for that paragraph. Is that clear?
Your worship?
I wonder if we could have a second severance on this motion with the paragraph above it regarding the site remediation discussion that we just had.
Okay. So just for the audience and council members, a request to sever a motion doesn't require a seconder. So we will now be voting on the motion that staff report P 2019-34 be received and council enact and pass authorization bylaws to execute a site plan control agreement, encroachment agreement, and hoarding agreement conditional upon receiving the following within 2 weeks of the date of this approval or by August 6, 2019. Bullet number 1, demonstration that the necessary easements are in place to ensure legal access over the adjacent lands, including 1 Hume Street and any other lands as may be required to allow the proposed access to 263 Hurontario Street from Hume Street to function appropriately, and easements as may be required for any other purposes. Semicolon. Bullet 2, insurance being provided in the prescribed format to the satisfaction of the town treasurer. Semicolon. And bullet 3, a certified check being provided in the amount of $10,000 to cover the estimated cost of outstanding contingency fees expended in review of this development application, for additional legal review, and for inspection of the design and landscaping components of this project. That is the motion that's on the table that I'm calling the vote on now. All in favor? Is that a question?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
My apologies. I understand the question that Councillor Hamlin just asked and agree with, and I appreciate the answer that was given. I didn't get an answer, or if I did get the answer, I don't understand, and I would appreciate clarification maybe from the developer as it relates to the renderings that are shown online, because the renderings online don't line up with what we are approving. Am I missing something?
No, and I will ask for clarification from the developer, but bearing in mind that what we are approving today is what governs. So any diagram or rendering, to the extent that it is inaccurate or contradicts what we are voting on this council table today, is null and void. But if there's an answer from the developer on that specific question, I'm happy to entertain.
May I ask a point of clarification though before the applicant answers? Because it was brought forward on a previous application. In fact, actually Councillor Hamlin raised the point. I didn't agree with her, but she raised the point. It was a good one, and that was that if it is a phased building, what is the exterior on the east side that's going to be fronting St. Marie? What would that look like if phase 2 didn't go ahead?
To the extent you can answer that, we would appreciate it.
With regards to phase 2, we don't have a design yet, but obviously we'd be going through the exact same process and be honoring any heritage or anything else that's required. But right now we're focused on the site plan at hand and trying to get through phase 1. But also to address your comment with regards to the renderings, we looked at the renderings. The individual who made it stretched the one side a little bit longer than it was. It is correct, it does execute halfway through the site, and then there's a piece of property there and we don't know what the house is. So like but it's actually not there, so it was just an error in the renderings. But it does execute halfway through, it does not continue through the same point.
So I think just to clarify the Deputy Mayor's question on the portion, what is the facade on the portion if it doesn't go all the way across on the portion there where the boundary of the vacant lot, the exterior is consistent with the facade exterior is consistent with the balance of the property?
It's consistent with the balance of the property, that is correct.
Is that your question?
So,
It answers the question, but with all due respect, the rendering that's online, the image that has been placed is not consistent. The streets that are shown are Hurontario, St. Marie, Hume. I mean, that's just black and white. I know those properties inside and out, and I know the vacant land. That's not accurate. There is no dispute of that.
we will ensure that we speak to our marketing team and then we'll have the drawings corrected to make sure that they're correct to what is going to be constructed. But I can assure you that the architectural plans and all of the drawings submitted are correct and exactly what is going to be constructed.
That's satisfying. All right. So with that being said, we'll go back to the original motion. I'm not reading it again. And
Come on.
so it's unclear. We're going to call a vote then on the first paragraph in the 3 bullets. Okay. All in favor? So It is, well, it is being recorded, yes. And then I will call the vote. Sorry, I thought it was unanimous. All opposed? Are you opposed or in favor?
No,
In favor,
the
okay,
discussion's
yeah.
been done, I was right at the start.
Okay, I had that one as being unanimous, so I think we're good on that. There was none opposed.
None opposed.
Okay. So then we will go to the second paragraph, which is, and that council herein approve discharging the site remediation agreement from the title of the lands to be developed pursuant to the site plan control agreement between Stonebrook Developments Collingwood Inc. and the town of Collingwood only, and the site remediation agreement shall remain on title to all other lands listed in the site remediation agreement, and any securities as may be determined are available shall be retained until work set out in the agreement are complete. And I take from that you mean the site remediation agreement.
Correct.
Staff, okay, thank you. So, questions or comments on that paragraph? Councilor McLeod.
I apologize for severing it. I clearly need better glasses. I thought the word retained was returned. I apologize.
There's a whole Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny episode. All right, then I'm going to call the vote on that paragraph. All in favor? That is carried unanimously as well. That now brings us to the last paragraph where the police chief is going to rant. And that council herein approve discharging the section 37 agreement, bonusing agreement from the title of the Monaco property. Councilor Jeffrey. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I said it.
You said it, okay.
I'm just gonna enforce it with a vote, but I really hope everybody understands it's an emotional thing and it probably needs to pass.
Strong rant. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Okay.
I hear.
I will call the vote then. All in favor? Opposed? Duly noted. Councilor McCann, you're full.
No dispositive.
Okay. That's carried 6-3. So I even on your. So. Okay. Clerk has that under control. All right. Development and Operations Standing Committee Report. Councilor Doherty. There's a bylaw. We just can't say goodbye to this one. Okay. Councilor Doherty, you have bylaw 2019-52.
I do, Your Worship. And moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall, be it resolved that bylaw 2019-052, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan control agreement, encroachment agreement, and a hoarding agreement for the development located at 263 Ontario Street and 1 Hume Street, referred to as the Monaco development, be enacted and passed this 22nd day of July 2019.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. I think that does bring us to the staff report. Councilor Doherty.
Yes.
Standing committee report, sorry.
Yes. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall, be it resolved that Council receive the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held July 16th, 2019, as presented. And our discussions were pretty well as fulsome as they were around this table, and there were no further staff updates.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. That concludes the Development and Operations Committee, so we're into staff reports. Item 13.1, PRC 2019-12, who would have that?
That would be me.
Councillor Madigan.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor McLeod, be it resolved that staff report PRC 2019-12 Fisher Field project update be hereby received.
Director Kohler, would you like to make some comments on this before I call the vote?
Sure, thank you, Worship. This is a report that was requested by council and that we did our best to provide in light of the fact that we're in the midst of the design process. I understand that it's certainly woken up a lot of conversation via the media report on the report, so it may have us moving into an open house type situation where we can clarify things for the public and get more input. So in that sense, it was good to be able to provide that and wake up some conversation. But I understand that it's a little frustrating not have a final design at this point.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Coleman.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's probably no surprise that I have some comments to issue, but first and foremost, I want to be very, very clear that, and to recognize the hard work that Director Culver has put into this project, because there's no doubt that there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of stakeholders, and I think we should certainly commend him on a really interesting design concept that's come forward. But Mr. Mayor and Director Culver, I'm sure your inbox is as full as mine this evening with concerns coming in from the public. And I think concern might be a polite placeholder word for something a lot stronger when it comes to the washrooms. So what we see currently in this design is one toilet for women, one toilet for men, and one accessible toilet, and then some pretty exciting things for a referee. So I would like to clarify with Director Culver how we're going to move forward from what's been sort of the surprise from the public, that what they're seeing appears to be focused on office space and referee space, and less so washrooms, what I'm going to refer to as adequate washrooms for the number of users at the facility.
Director Culver.
Your Worship, the washrooms are actually not identified male or female, they're actually unisex washrooms, so either gender could use either washroom or any of the washrooms. And the number of washrooms actually came out of a stakeholder session at the beginning, as well as standard building practices, with the acknowledgement that when a tournament occurs, that additional portable washrooms would have to be provided to accommodate. This is currently the state with the portable washrooms is 3, and expanded for the sake of tournaments. And I again, we were following a number of pieces of advice. Having said that, given that the design is in a fluid state at this point, we have been taking a look at adding as well. And as we're sort of in a tug and pull, a push and pull situation where we try to drive towards the budget that we identified, but at the same time, making sure that the adequate amenities are provided as well. So we've taken all of the comments that were received today, as well as that of Councillor Comey too, and we'll continue to push forward looking for more accommodations.
I appreciate that answer. I think the issue here being, I think what would give peace of mind to council as we move forward to vote on the budget and the final design is, rather than, you touched on something I think that's interesting, standard building practice, I would want assurance from the architect that given the number of users at this field on any given night, that meets those general design requirements for number of publicly accessible toilets, because whether they're gender neutral or not, I think we're talking about a sum total of 3 toilets, which is surprising given the number of users at this field. So I sent you a number of questions which you did address, and other ones were rooted in my concern about us providing office space to the soccer club, and whether or not that would be a leasing arrangement, how they would compensate us for that. So to make a long council evening short, I guess my question is, when would council see a revised set of drawings that better address what we're hearing from the public?
Councillor, I'm going to pass it over to Director, but I guess what I'm seeing out of this is, actually, having been involved in the Central Park Steering Committee and looking at a multi-use facility for thousands of people, I certainly would say that this, I think, has been a good event in the sense it sparked conversation. The feedback I'm hearing from the community is that they want to see increased leverage of other user groups, which from a taxpayer's perspective means we're going to get more bang for our buck. So I see this as an opportunity to now get some public engagement going and have discussions about what the public expects to see and what we can afford. And then you have the discussion, as we did at Central Park, about the budget, about the feasibility, and how you move forward. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Director Culver.
Through your worship, so given that we're looking at an additional, probably open house concept public information session, when would a final design be? We were kind of targeting sort of late summer, early fall. I would hope to stick to that timeline, but without understanding what revisions might come out of an additional public session, I just want to have that sort of latitude in place. I think similar to what was discussed with Sunset Point Playground, we want to make sure we do it right rather than quick. So, following the same philosophy, I hope that's a satisfactory answer.
Yes, it sounds really exciting. I'm pleased to hear this. So I just want to be absolutely clear so I can grocery shop in peace to know that I can tell the public that they can anticipate an open house session, so where they can come in and, because of course we didn't have our committee meeting on July the 8th, which would have allowed this opportunity for the public to come and speak. So I'm really excited to hear this, that we can tell the public they can anticipate an open house session where they can provide their fantastic feedback. And then this council will get an opportunity targeting late summer, early fall to see a revised set of drawings that takes all that input together. Because otherwise I was hoping we wouldn't be in a situation where we needed to defer this report.
I think just to summarize what Director Culver said is, depending on the type and extent of the feedback we get at the public meeting, the redo, it could push that back in terms of the renderings and the design process.
That's fine.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Just a matter of public record. If the public open house is held and the feedback is strong and it moves us in a different direction that delays the project, so be it. I'm fine with that. Let's take our time, let's get it done right. We have an arena at a park that went through a design process where we've got a lobby that's too big, a canteen we don't use, no girls' washrooms, or change room I should say, and 6 change rooms that are too small for junior hockey. Let's get it right.
I think that's probably fairly universal for those of us that lived through that. So unless there's more comments, I'm going to call the vote. Oh, Councillor McLeod.
The vote, just to clarify, is we are not, if we say yes to receiving this report, we are not committing ourselves to spending $911,000 on 3 loos out at Fisherfield. This is just furthering the process.
Yes.
We are not committing. We're just saying, thank you, Dean, for putting together this report, yes?
We're receiving the report and planning next steps.
Thank you, just wanted to be sure on that one.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having read the staff report and how many users use this and all the other users, like walkers and snowshoers and so on, and then all the emails from the public, I actually took my dog out there to walk the site. And I had one question of Director Culver that he said he'd check on for tonight. And that is, there is a wood board fence that is mostly fallen down at that property. It's just was hammered in the ground, all the posts are falling off, many of the boards are down on the ground, there's nails out of them. And it did strike me a 2-year-old who climbed on it would probably take most of it out. So my question was whether it was possible to actually remove this fence for safety reasons.
Director Culver.
Through your worship, following Councillor Hammond's call this afternoon, we'll set a timeline. I don't exactly know when it will come down, but we'll remove it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Culver.
Yeah, one final comment. Thank you for reminding me of something, Councillor Hamlin. Why don't we then plan a field visit for council? Because when council took their bus tour back when we first came in, we didn't make it to Fisher due to time constraints. But as Councillor McLeod pointed out, it's almost $1 million, and it would probably serve council well to have a field trip out to this location led by Director Culver to walk us through the plans.
Well, I'll leave that in Dean's hands and he can send out, and I think with all our busy schedules, for those of us that can make it, take advantage of the opportunity.
Great, thank you.
All right, calling the vote to receive the report then. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Motions. notice of motion, that's my notice of motion, so I'm going to pass the chair over to the deputy mayor while I speak to the motion, and I will stay, he will continue to chair the meeting until the vote is concluded.
Okay, thank you. Do you actually have the motion, or have you deferred it to somebody? You got it? Okay, so if you would like to read your motion.
I will. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved, whereas the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative has made a plea to urge member municipalities to implement a ban of single-use plastics in an effort to protect our Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway and furthering local support of this global issue. Now therefore be it resolved, the Council herein instructs staff to commence the process of eliminating all single-use plastics in municipal facilities and report back to Council in 6 months to provide an update on the progress.
Thank you. Would you like to speak first or last to your motion?
You know what, I'm going to go first. And I have talked at some length about this initiative, and it has been on the radar. In fact, our staff has kind of got ahead of us on this one. They've created a internal green committee. But what I will do is just obviously single-use plastics, as by way of simple definition, are just plastics or disposable plastics that are used only once before they are thrown away or recycled. These items are things like plastic bags, straws, coffee stirrers, soda and water bottles, and most food packaging. They contain a high level of petroleum base. It's not biodegradable, and if it's not recycled, it goes into landfill where it's buried or gets into the water and finds its way to our Great Lakes. Plastics will not biodegrade, which is to decompose into a natural substance like soil. It will degrade or break down into tiny particles after many years, and in the processes of breaking down, it releases toxic chemicals and additives that are used to shape and harden the plastic, which make the way into our food and water supply. In terms of human impacts, they're known to be found in our bloodstreams, and the latest research has shown that they disrupt endocrine systems, which can cause cancer, infertility, birth defects, impaired immunity, and many other ailments, and that's just in the humans. We know that they impact our ecology and our food chain, and they have impacts at every level. And so while we do not have a plastic island floating around the Great Lakes, we do have these microbeads which are contaminating the environment. And this, in my submission, is a simple and responsible way to address that problem. We are a community that is on the waterfront. The waterfront is a key portion of our DNA, I think, here. We are a healthy lifestyles community. We are looking at revitalizing our waterfront. We are cognizant of our watersheds and investing in preserving those. And to me, this is a low-hanging and essential item that needs to be addressed in terms of eliminating microplastics and single-use plastics from our municipal buildings and facilities. For those that have been reading, you will know that in BC Court of Appeal struck down Victoria's ban on plastics in third parties outside of Town Hall on the basis that it may not be a municipal jurisdiction. That said, the Supreme Court had upheld many years ago a pesticide ban, so we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will do that in this case. In any event, whatever level of government has the ability to ban plastics in our commercial district, I think us, by leading by example, will set a good example for our commercial district and other residents and raise awareness. And at the same time, both the province and the federal government have talked about a single-use plastics ban. So whatever level of government it comes from, I think it's going to come eventually. So those are the basis of my motion. And we are joining a growing swell of municipalities throughout Ontario, Quebec, and North America. This is a Great Lakes Cities Initiative. That's 120 municipalities, north and south of the border, and we're protecting our ecology and our water supply for generations to come.
Council, are there any questions of the mover or of staff? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Saunderson, great initiative. I'm proud to say that all the businesses that I own have switched over to absolutely everything biodegradable at a cost. So this is nice to see the town following suit. Is there a way somehow where we can get staff to almost measure what they used to use and what they're not using now, so then we can say we've stopped using this much weight of plastic single use? Just as it's great to do this, like a great token, but we want to get some quantifiable evidence that we can show other communities that we are going to be the leader in this. and they should follow suit as well. Is there a way to do that? Has there been an initiative at a higher level that can measure the non-use of single plastic?
Well, I guess we can, I don't know, look to see how we measure products that we have used in the past that we are no longer using.
Thank you, through your worship. We could list the kind of things that we're doing to eliminate single-use plastic, but I'm not sure we can actually put a quantitative number to it, but we can actually list those things that we're avoiding or eliminating the use of. And we can talk a bit about some of the initiatives that we've put in place within the town facilities to increase our environmental initiative and reduce our carbon footprint. But I'm not sure we can actually quantitatively tell you how much less plastic we're using. I mean, I think we can try, but give you a ballpark, but I'm not sure that we can actually.
Exactly, it would be a pure estimate. I'll tell you where, pardon me, where this comes from. A friend of mine has just quit smoking, and he's got this app on his phone that shows how much money he saved, how much life he's put back in his system, and he's very proud of it and shows me constantly, which is sometimes a little bit annoying. But it would be just a best guess. And then it might push other people to say, oh my gosh, we've saved this much from the landfill, we've saved this much from, no, I definitely don't want people weighing plastic bags and straws, and we're all too busy for that, but thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McLeod?
Thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I also applaud this initiative, but I do think that, as with many things, the devil is in the details, and I wonder if you could elucidate for us, perhaps, Mr. Mayor, some of the practical measures that this might touch upon. For example, I don't know whether the plastic liner of a trash barrel is considered to be a single-use plastic. It's plastic, and it only gets used one single time. So does that make that, so are we going to be using paper bags in the trash barrels at the rink, and my half-empty coffee cup is gonna go in there, and then it's just all gonna be disgusting?
So,
My concern.
yes, it's a good question. It is a broad measure, and we're giving staff sort of 6 months to experiment and figure out how you do that. There are compostable garbage bags now, just as there are compostable pet waste bags, so they can go into compost. So there are certainly alternatives, and the thrust of the motion is really to get staff to look at our carbon footprint in terms of plastics and do what we can to eliminate them. And one simple example, since the motion was tabled, is we're now using the recyclable Keurig coffee pods as opposed to single-use pods. So it radiates down, and we're asking staff in this motion to look at what we can eliminate.
So as a follow-up, are we working to eliminate rather than implementing a ban? Because a ban and not to get into the weeds with regard to semantics, but it strikes me that if we say ban, then the day that we pass this, we have to find a solution for our single-use trash bags for those liners, and what do we bring the ketchup for the French fries in our concessions into the building and that sort of thing. And it's just, I feel like sometimes if we have a sweeping generalization and we can't live up to it, then it's kind of embarrassing.
I think the first in the motion, the wording says, look at eliminating.
Right.
Right, so we're looking at eliminating it. We're not imposing a ban, and we really, under the recent Court of Appeal decision in BC, I don't know that we have the ability to list a ban on it, but what we're saying in Town Hall and municipal facilities is we are working to eliminate.
Commence the process of eliminating. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Are there any other questions around the table? Councillor Hamlin?
I just wanted to thank the mayor for bringing this forward. I think, it's time now for all of us to be thinking about eliminating the use of plastic, and if we can do our part in our town facilities by not having single-use plastics, I think that's a great move forward, so I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Doty?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also would like to congratulate the Mayor for bringing forward this initiative. This is very reflective of, I think, the attitudes of our community in general, and we need to be reflecting that. We did, all of us, receive communication from the Canadian Beverage Association today. And they, of course, were pointing out the fact that most plastics, 75% of plastics, according to their estimates, are being installed in blue boxes. However, we have had some discussions with the county, and we've had information from the county that yes, there are lots of plastics that are being blue boxed and picked up by the county, but that there is no market for those plastics. And so it becomes even more critical that we just eliminate the use of them altogether. So I believe I am correct in that confirmation coming from the county about the use of, or sorry, the marketability of recycled plastics.
Yeah, to give the background, and I know it's there's a combination of plastics and glass, and the revenues from the county recycling program have dropped dramatically as the market seems to slowed on that. And whether it's all attributable to plastics or the combination of plastics and glass, I can't be clear for you. But and I think in addition to that, the recycling process has its own carbon footprint. So by moving away from the single-use plastics, I think we're moving in a sustainable direction.
Thank you.
Councillor Conley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, congratulations, Mr. Mayor. And then you mentioned our commercial district. While the BIA minutes have not been formally received by council, you can anticipate seeing a congratulations from the BIA on this important step and creating awareness in our commercial district, as mentioned by Councillor Madigan. And then I'd also like to ask the Deputy Clerk for a recorded vote, please.
So, seeing that, we'll call the question. I'll ask the Deputy Clerk.
If I can say one last thing.
Sorry, yes.
I think the credit is thank you for that, but it's well shared around this table. I know I've had meetings with many of you about the whole issue, and we've talked about the Great Lakes Cities Initiative and just the way we're moving. So I think this is an exciting moment, and we look forward to working with our business owners in town to working towards eliminating. Right.
Deputy Mayor, may I have 2 minutes?
Floor's not open. I'm sorry, sir.
Floor's not open?
No.
Okay.
So with that, please, I'll ask you to call the question.
Okay, all those in favor, please stand. And that's carried unanimous, thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda, we have a notice of motion. Deputy Mayor. Or did I miss that? Motions. Five. Motions, notice of motion. I got the wrong one here. Okay, so we'll go to 14.2 then. Councillor Berman, your request for staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall, be it resolved that council herein request a staff report to provide options regarding the future of the Collingwood grain terminals further to the 2018 engineering report. And further that the report include, but not be limited to, consideration of public-private partnerships, full divestiture, waterfront master plan integration, public consultation, and potential third-party expertise to facilitate and guide the process.
So, just to close the circle on this, as I indicated before, the clerk and deputy clerk are working on some amendments to the procedural bylaw. One of them being that while a request for staff report is not a notice of motion per se, that we're trying to get those requests on the agenda so that the public is aware of them and that staff is aware of them, and the individual putting it on the floor has the ability to talk with staff. So that being said, Councillor Berman, do you have a seconder? Would you give me a seconder? All right. Sorry, it's right here then. So I don't know, do you want to go first or last on this then?
I'll go first, but there's not much to say. It seems like I think we can all agree that it's time to move the discussion forward. The last report, as it says in there, was June of 2018, I think, to Colma that the previous council got. And I discussed this with staff as to the best way to kickstart the process, and they approved of this. And also, to follow up your comment, I really want to compliment the clerk's department on the way of doing this. It was very clear cut, and it was out on Friday to the public, and I didn't get a single phone call or email from a resident about it, so I'll take that as a compliment on how transparent it was.
Okay, great. Council, any questions or comments for a public vote? Councillor Comey.
A quick question, please, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to see this on the agenda, and I thank Councillor Berman. I think he knows he's in good company on this council is going to move forward. I'm just administratively, I'm a little perplexed because on December 12th of last year, this council received a priority item called the Harborlands and the Terminals, which we agreed that council would receive a report that's very similar to what Councillor Berman's asking for, a compilation of base information regarding the terminals and everything that is known about the spit, a strategy for public consultation, the development of a framework for soliciting advice from all departments, and it said it was due to come to council early this year. So I just want to see, is this amalgamating that priority report? Is it superseding it? Are we getting two reports? So I'm not sure who could best answer that for me.
Well, I think, and I might look to the CAO, but certainly the potential third-party expertise to facilitate and guide the process with respect to partnerships and public partnerships. I think that's an element that we weren't looking at before. So what we're trying to do here, I think, is kind of close the circle and work this thing forward in a more strategic way, and not just looking at the condition and the prospects and the remediation, but also looking at what type of opportunities are out there for third-party partnerships to finance and give us some context to our discussions on the economics. I'll look to the CAO if there's anything to add to that. So my understanding, just Councillor Berman, you can jump in, but in talking with you, my understanding was you were looking at trying to find ways that we might look not only what needs to be done, but how we might finance that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and what I had liked in this original priority report that came to council in December was it really stressed that public consultation, right? A good conversation with the public as well as opportunity to mine for public opinion. So I'm glad to see that in your motion as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Madigan.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Berman, this is a great concept, and we got it, last council got it last June 25th, so thank you for kickstarting it once again. Are you looking at a time limit, your timeline on getting this back? Because last time it was told that we would be receiving it early this year, and it's now the end of July, so early this year is gone. So are you looking at a month, 2 months, 3 months? Because I don't want anything to come back premature from staff that we go and then the public gets involved and we're still in the planning stages of anything.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Madigan, I wasn't looking at a timeline. I would refer that to the CAO, but I think to echo what the Deputy Mayor said regarding Fisher Field, that this has been something that we've had options that came to Deputy Mayor's Council, at least a couple of them, to do with that property and the terminals, and I think we want to do it once and do it right with this project as well. So I would look to the CAO as far as the
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Berman and Councillor Madigan. So we've got a number of sort of very strategic game-changing reports that's due to come to council, and what we're trying to do is to triage these reports as best as we can and to bundle them as best as we can, not to put council in a situation where they're making decisions on reports that are preemptive. So we're trying to bring these things together. One of the recommendations that was made in December regarding public consultation, there's nothing in what we're doing that prevents the public from actually providing comments to us now on how we should dispose, if that's the will of council, of the grain terminal. So we'll try and get the report to council as soon as we can. I suspect many of these things will probably come to head in late summer, early fall as we try to anticipate some of the fiscal pressures in the budget 2020. So I'd posit that we probably will bring these reports back to council in time for the 2020 budget deliberations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions or comments, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Okay, now to 14.1, sorry, 14.3. Oh, sorry, under notices of motion, we don't have any bylaws, so 16.1, Deputy Mayor. And Councillor Jeffrey, you're going to step out.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Table the first part. So moved by me and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that Council waive the requirements of the procedural bylaw to introduce a motion without the required notice for the consideration of the Out of the Cold program.
And I think you're entitled to speak briefly just for the need to waive motion of the timelines, if you'd like.
The brief comment I would make is that this relates to urgency of timeline to ensure that the program, if passed, could operate this winter.
Thank you. And there's no discussion otherwise, I think on the notice to waive. So that being said, I will call the vote. All in favor of waiving the notice? And is carried unanimously. Deputy Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll move the motion. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Berman. Whereas Council requested on June 10th, 2019, staff investigate the request from the Volunteer Task Force seeking to establish an Out of the Cold program within the town of Collingwood for a commitment of $90,000 annually for 3 years. And whereas the task force needs a timely response to ensure a program can be coordinated in time for the upcoming winter season, and whereas staff have confirmed that the funds are available within the existing budget through the reallocation of expenses with the use of the provincial modernization funding, now therefore be it resolved that Council of the Town of Collingwood herein provides support in the amount of $75,000 in the 2019-2020 to be used at the discretion of the CAO for assisting the Out of the Cold program, with the expenses to be drawn upon primarily for staffing once the program coordinator and overnight staff are in place, and further that additional annual funding be considered during the budget deliberations following receipt of an annual program review to be provided to Council.
Wish to make some comments now or go at the end?
Sure, if that's okay. My comments would be fairly brief, and that is that from an anecdotal standpoint, although not today, but the last maybe 72 hours, we've just experienced a heat wave. And you know, it's interesting to compare sort of when we have a heat wave, we tend not to give any thought to the fact that we simply open our facilities, we make them available to the public, whether they be for the elderly, whether they be for the young, whether they be for anybody for that matter, to ensure that public safety is looked after. We make sure that there are cooling centers, we make sure that the public have access to washrooms, water, those types of things. And yet when it comes time to have the same type of conversation, and this is a general comment, not specific to the town of Collingwood, but in general, when it comes to those who are most vulnerable through our most severe conditions, those being the winter months, there seems to be some reservation as to whose responsibility, who funds, and primarily who supports these types of programs. So we have had an opportunity presented to us by a task force that is made up by a group of volunteers. They are no strangers to our community. Many of the names that you saw in the report that I circulated to you, you know very well, and you know that the things that they've done to support community initiatives in the past. And they've come forward and they've basically asked this municipality to provide them with what I will refer to as seed money to get a program up and running for the winter of 2019-2020, and that they would establish a program that is not only based on the budget and the merits and the planning of previous established Out of the Cold programs, one being Alliston within our county, but others throughout the province. And I simply state that simply because I want people to know that this is not a task force of people who've come together with best intentions to solve a problem. These are people who have already come together and spent a number of hours, considerable hours, time and effort, to recognize a problem and draft a plan of execution in terms of how they can address this need on a short-term basis. And the short-term basis is a 3-year commitment with the idea of moving to some type of a permanent solution within that period of time. So tonight, I'm simply asking Council to give consideration to sort of expedite the process. When Mark Sheehan and Pam Hillier were here on the 10th of June, one of the comments that they stressed on several occasions was the fact that ideally they would be ahead of the curve, and in fact they're maybe 3-4 months behind the curve as it is right now from a planning standpoint. And if we were under normal circumstances, we would probably bring this decision forward for budget deliberation in due course, but we're not, and therefore in the dead of summer, in the dead of heat, I'm bringing forward this with you to consider for the winter coming. So again, you know, when we have severe extremes in weather in the summer and the winter, they are apples and oranges. But an apple and an orange are both fruit, and severe heat and winter are both weather related. And at the end of the day, we have identifiable people within our community who would be welcomed as guests to a program that would be administered by volunteers, by a paid coordinator, and by paid employees on a nightly basis. A program that would be fiscally responsible in the sense that the flow-throughs of any funds would be looked after and managed by Community Connection, that bylaws for the task force, the working manual in terms of how things would operate would be looked after, so that the do's, the don'ts, etc., in terms of the daily operations would be looked after. And that in your support or potential support this evening of the $75,000 that I'm asking for, what you would effectively be allowing them to do is to go out and hire a part-time, a coordinator who would be part-time year-round for the position, and then when the funds are required, come the setup or the establishment in November of the program, the paid positions on a nightly basis. The information that I passed through to you indicated that a potential site has been determined. There are some T's to be crossed, I's to be dotted, but the site that we're looking at, or I should say they are looking at, is the church that is directly across from, I'm going to say, Tim Hortons on here, Ontario. I use Tim Hortons simply because that tends to be a landmark that most people can identify with. This facility has the space and capacity, and most importantly is the one center that has come forward willing to do this so far. The other component I would simply draw your attention to is that beyond the task force and the people who make up the task force, there have been a number of denominations from the faith-based community who have come forward and who are willing to donate both in kind, their time, but more importantly to coordinate and facilitate a meal program that would accompany this. And I think, and I'm purely speculating when I say this, but I think that the meal program could in fact actually be a more significant component, because in the evidence that I have seen, we do have homeless people within our community. They may not be visible because many of those people choose to, for circumstances, couch surf for a period of time, etc. And what I do see happening is that they would have an opportunity to make use of the program, the meal program on a daily basis. Maybe it's 2-3 times a week, maybe it's 7 days a week, etc., to be providing to provide nourishment, etc. And the last point that I would make is that there would be in-kind support workers as part of this program, so that when the intake is done properly, to ensure safety of the guests, to ensure safety of the workers, etc., there would be people there to work with the individuals to ensure that the resources within the community, whether they be through the faith base, whether they be through the county, etc., that we are pointing them in the right direction, so that when the doors open the morning after, we're not simply sending them out into the cold to fare on their own, that potentially those resources would be made available, and we ensure that they have access to them. So with that said, the motion, I think, speaks for itself. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Ham.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that, lengthy description. I think it's a well-received initiative in our community, and I want to say how grateful I am to the volunteers and the others who are making this happen. My question is, I think of the County of Simcoe as being the entity that looks after social housing in our community, and I'm just wondering whether the county's been approached for funding as well for this initiative, or whether there's any merit in approaching the county.
So specifically to the motion tonight and for year one, no. But I think it was referenced in the documentation that was sent around that, yes, as part of the commitment from this group, the task force, to not only go out to the public for additional fundings, but they would be going to the county and other agencies for years 2 and 3. There's a program, and I apologize, I should know this off the top of my head and I don't, but it's a county program. It's an umbrella program, and the acronym is CHIPPY. And that's the program that they would be applying to specifically for funding.
Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor Hall. I am enthusiastically in support of this initiative. I have a practicality question that I'd like to ask you regarding the final paragraph of your motion, which says that additional annual funding be considered during the budget deliberations following receipt of an annual program review to be provided to council. This program, I believe, wraps up in April, November to April, and budget deliberations generally take place prior to that. How are you expecting us to navigate that gap?
So if I was making my budget presentation to you this evening, I probably would step up and say, you know what, I would like to identify X number of dollars as a placeholder in the budget to be drawn upon in the event, and just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much. Through you to the Deputy Mayor, thank you for bringing forth this initiative. I have 2 questions, and one of them actually may wind up going over to staff. But the first question is, the ask was for 90,000, and your motion asks for 75,000. And I'm just wondering why the lesser amount in your motion.
Well, I know where your second question's going, and so we'll defer that to staff, but thank you. Thank you. The one thing that I would just maybe go up to paragraph 1 is that we had the presentation on the 10th, and then there was discussion at the table here to have staff input. That has happened. There have been several meetings actually with staff as it relates to the logistics, how this could potentially flow through monies, those types of things. And so to your second question, which you'll ask in a moment, we'll get staff to comment. The rationale for the 75,000, and it's what I've tabled, was simply a budget that was simply put together by this task force. It's quite a good budget, and it's, as I mentioned in my preamble, it draws on past experiences from out of the COLE programs in other communities, Alston being one example. The 75,000 represents the staffing component, and that was a number that we could identify and sort of pull out and say, okay, as a municipality, we could clearly get behind that. I use programs where we, for example, have received funds from upper tier levels of government for a program, and then we've allocated it to staff dollars, say, for the position that was first created for Jennifer Parker, and that's evolved into something. It's a bit of a stretch, but I go back to my apples and oranges. I'm going to use that as a stretch. But the point being is that was a tangible number that we could sort of identify and say we could cover that. The the 15,000 were for things that were, they're important things, they're things that will have to be covered. My hope is that with council support tonight for this motion, that this task force and this group will have the foundation and the strong support to then be able to go to the community and say, this is an initiative we want to get behind. And when they are seeking out donations, because part of their mandate is to actually get private donations, that they will be able to make up some of that that difference from the community at large. But if you had different thoughts, I would certainly welcome them.
Thank you. And I do, but I will go on to my second question. And the recommendation is for this funding to be drawn out of existing budgets. And to my way of thinking, this municipality benefited from over $1 million in surplus in the past year. And it seems to me that one of the most giving gestures that we could provide would be to take this money out of surplus and allocate it to this program. And I suppose that's not really, I guess that would be a question I would have to direct to staff.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor. The surplus that we declared in 2018 is oversubscribed. There are all kinds of contingencies that we're drawing upon. So to request that this money be taken from surplus would be trying to take money from a surplus that may already be oversubscribed. That would be my response, and the Treasurer can comment on this. Going back to your question regarding why 75 and why not 90, to supplement the Deputy Mayor's comment, the 75 is a discrete, identifiable expenditure that we can leverage. And I think Councillor Hamlin's point that while this is not a responsibility of the municipality, I think all of us feel that we have an obligation to fulfill a need that exists in the community, and we're trying to do our best to find a way of funding it. So the recommendation we have before council is to take the 75,000 from the funds allocated to us recently by the province. We're yet to bring a report to council on how we utilized that amount of money, but this would be the initial draw from that source.
Okay, thank you. Notwithstanding, I would like to suggest what may be a friendly amendment, I hope, that the request be put back to 90,000. And the reason why I say that is because having seen the backup documentation that the Deputy Mayor provided, it's clear that the program and the budgeting thus far by the organization is detailed and it's well rationalized. And so I, as one member of council, would be willing to support the entire ask of 90,000, and not to trivialize money generally, but the difference between 90,000 and 75,000 is not that significant when we're talking that much money anyway.
So taking the motion in its context, Councillor Doherty, I don't think an increase of $15,000 is a friendly amendment. I think if this motion were not to pass, then you could put a motion on the table asking that it be increased to 90. But that's not, I'm ruling it's not a friendly amendment.
Okay.
It's the amplitude of the proposed amendment, given the amounts in issue and the rationale given for it, I think it takes it out. It's not a small tweak. Okay?
Okay.
Any other comments or questions, Council? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. All right, we can get Councillor Jeffrey back in here. County report, Deputy Mayor, we didn't have a July meeting, I don't know if you really need to update us unless you feel there's something urgent. Alright, any old or other or deferred business, council? Seeing none, any other business? Councilor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It wouldn't be a council meeting if I didn't ask Director McDonald about an update on our Hamilton Drain crosswalk, which I'm sure he's eager to complete so that I can stop asking him for updates.
Councilor McDonald, or Director McDonald.
Through your worship to Councillor Comey, yes, tenders closed for that project on June 27th. We're currently finalizing the contract documents with the successful bidder. It's anticipated we'll have a startup meeting in the next week. Once we've initiated a contract, the contractor can then schedule his locates and order materials. And it's anticipated that he'll take 4 to 5 weeks to complete the project from startup, and that's anticipating for late August, early September for completion of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, and then I think I just, and I mentioned to Director McDonald just to note, school starts September 3rd. So I guess we can hopefully hear a good update at our next meeting of council on the 26th. And I had a second item of other business, please, and that was for the update that Director Culver provided to committee since our July 8th meeting was canceled. And it came up tonight, and that was a Sunset Point Playground update. Director Culver, your email to council and committee mentioned that you'd be reaching out to sort of get a parental input. And then I heard from the mayor tonight something in the effect of a staff report, so maybe you could clarify and update us on that, please.
Mr. Culver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the first part, there is a public consultation being planned as of this morning. It's set for August 15th with advertising and information about that session to go out in the next few days. I'm not sure I'm clear on the second part of the question.
I think, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned something to the effect you thought that the survey results would get bundled into a staff report on Sunset Playground?
Talk about the Enviro Park. My understanding, Director Culver, is that there would be a staff report coming back with the plans for the park, which would include the public survey results that were done online.
Certainly, Your Worship. So the intention will be, once we've gone through all of the public consultation, we pulled all the materials together and we come to council with a final project for approval. We'll be indicating all of the inputs that were brought into bearing on the design and how we arrived there, and that would include the results of that questionnaire.
That's it.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So when we do get that, when that does come to council, just so we're clear, it doesn't come to council and we say, oh, that wasn't what we thought, that will include the raw data from that survey, not generalized notions, just like we got with the cannabis survey, those actual results from the respondents. Is that correct?
If that's council's wish, we can do that.
Yes.
So I think if we're looking for quantified, we're getting some heads around the table. So I think maybe if that's the direction of council, we need to put that on the table and ask for direction if that's the case.
Through your worship, I'm just going to say that, I mean, I think staff must have the latitude to be able to interpret and analyze information and bring that information to council. If council wants to drill and question staff on that data, we can bring that and demystify that information. But I think we've got to have some ability to be able to synthesize and do an analysis and bring information here that's evidence-based.
So Councillor Comey, I think based on that answer, if you're requesting a specific type of data, you need to find a seconder and make it clear what you're looking for, and we'll put it to a vote because it'll be a direction of council.
Okay, that's surprising because I did mention that during the presentation by the Sunset Park Committee. I said it seems a little heavy-handed to have to require a motion for survey results from the public, but then I need to know if I need to put a notice of motion here tonight that will come on August 26th.
I'm not sure when it'll come. What I'd suggest tonight is you put it on the table, you find a seconder, and we'll vote on it tonight. But again, what I get sense I'm getting is not that the data is gonna be withheld, it's the way in which the data will be released. So if you're asking for it in a specific format, I think you need to get direction from council to direct staff to do it that way.
Okay, so I would put a motion tonight that on August 26th, I'd like to table that. Similar to what Councillor Berman did. I don't know if I'm asking for a staff report that contains that data.
I think you're giving direction to staff or a staff report about how the data is going to come back when the plans are finalized. So I don't think it's a notice of motion. So if you can find a seconder around the table tonight and explain what it is you're looking for, then we'll vote on it.
Okay, if I can.
Councillor Doherty.
It's just to make a suggestion as opposed to a seconder. And I'm wondering if none of us, I think, want to be perceived as micromanaging or wandering too deep into the reeds. But on the other hand, perhaps it could be agreed that the raw data could be available for inspection by any member of council who's interested in seeing it, but that the final report and recommendation would show a synthesized version of the study with recommendations.
I think we're just going to stick with my original ruling, and that is if you want the data in a certain format, explain the format and ask for direction from council to staff on that. Okay, so we'll put it in a request for a staff report. So we'll need a seconder and we'll vote on it.
So if I need to clarify, and again, I'm a little mystified by this. So we issued a survey in March to the public, and it says things like, what do you think? And one of the questions is, when replacing EnviroPark, should the same themes of water and environment be reflected in the playground, or should the town explore their themes? And people had questioned if they wanted to update the current themes or explore new themes. So this was a SurveyMonkey survey. So I think in SurveyMonkey, the function is to simply hit collate. So I'm just asking for council to receive the data from that, akin to what we received during the cannabis survey. So did 75% of the people want us to change the theme or keep the current theme? Did 100% of people want to see a water feature of the park, or 0%? So I'm not sure the exact wording, so I'm using the phrase raw data. I would just like someone to hit print and have the printout of the SurveyMonkey data from the Sunset Park survey that was issued in March.
So Councillor Comey, we had a public session with our consultant, and our task around the table is to basically order things from the menu. Staff come back, they cook it up, and we make requests. There's a fair degree of flexibility and latitude, I think, for staff. I can tell you in my participation with surveys that we've done around this table, the community-based strategic plan, we did many surveys. To my opinion, it's the benchmark of all the surveys we've done to date, and we didn't release the raw data. It was utilized in a way that produced a product with our consultant and with our staff. So yeah, I guess what I'm telling you is if you want to ask for that data, I think that's a specific direction coming from this council to staff, and you're going to need council to make that direction. So I'm inviting you to put it on the table. You can do it tonight, or you can do it in August, but August 26th might be a little late. So I'm just suggesting to you that level of detail, given the comments we've received from staff and the relationship between staff and council, this is a direction that would have to come from council.
Yeah, it's a reflection of our residents, right? So this is the feedback that I'm receiving. So I've described it best I can. Let's consider it on the table. So I've done my due diligence to the residents who are asking for this. And my ask is could council and the public please see the results from the Sunset Park survey? So if anyone would like to second that, that's what I'm putting on the table.
Do I have a second? Councillor Hamlin, any questions or comments before I call the vote? All right, all in favor of the release of the raw data from the EnviroPark survey? And all in favor, vote. Opposed? Okay, so that is defeated.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there any other business for you?
No.
Okay. All right, who would have the motion to proceed in camera? Councillor Hamlin.
Moved by Councillor Hamlin, seconded by Councillor Berman. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees. Item for discussion, A, CAO performance review.
Any comments or questions, council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is unanimous. So we will go into camera now. There may be a rise in report. I can't guarantee that. So any rise in report will be live streamed. And otherwise, that is it for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.